Some prophecies weren't carved in books. They were whispered, dreamt, or burned into memory by those who shouldn't have known what was coming. A child predicts a war. A red calf appears in Israel. These aren't sit myths. They're real visions, real rituals, and real predictions that came true, some recorded in history, others buried in folklore. You stir about to descend through 100 of them. Each one stranger. Not all prophecies need to be believed. Each one harder to ignore. Some just need to be heard. Let sense begin. Location: Delphi, ancient Greece. Level 1, the Oracle Sipts, warning to Croesus. Era 6th century BCE. Before launching an ambitious war against the rising Persian Empire, Croesus, ruler of Lydia, sought counsel from the most revered oracle in the ancient world, the Pythia, at Delphi. She sat above a hidden chasm in the temple of Apollo, breathing in mysterious vapors said to open her to the divine. Kings, generals, and wanderers alike climbed the sacred slopes to hear her speak, but her answers were never simple. The Oracle Sip's answer was recorded as this. Croesus posed a simple question. Should he go to war against Persia? If you cross the Halys River, you will destroy a great empire. Croesus took it as a sign of assured victory. He crossed the river. He invaded. And he lost. The empire that fell was his own. Within years, his kingdom of Lydia was swallowed by Cyrus the Great. Sardis, Croesus's golden capital, was besieged. His palace plundered. He himself was captured, bound and prepared for execution. It was only then atop the pyre as the fire was being lit, that he reportedly cried out the name of Solon, the Athenian sage, who once warned him that no man should be called happy until he has seen the end of his life. And just as suddenly, the flames were extinguished by a miraculous storm, or, according to some, by Cyrus himself, who was so moved by Croesus's fate and wisdom that he spared the fallen king's life. Croesus heard what he wanted to hear. He thought prophecy was a promise. It was a mirror. This story has echoed through history not just as a tale of fate, but of human blindness. We are told the future plainly sometimes, but always in the language we least understand. The oracle did not lie, but neither did she stop him. It stips the first lesson in prophecy. The future can be true. Certainty is not clarity, and still destroy you. Level 2. The destruction of Jerusalem foretold. Location: Jerusalem, Roman Judea. Era: 1st century CE. It began with a warning, quiet, poetic, and easily dismissed, as most true prophecies are. In the Gospel of Matthew, Jesus stands before the towering Second Temple in Jerusalem. His disciples admire its beauty, the stonework, the scale, the permanence. But he sees something else. Something crumbling. Truly I tell you, he says, not one stone here will be left on another. Every one will be thrown down. The warning is vague, even poetic. But within a generation, just 4 decades later, it came true. In 66 CE, a full rebellion ignited across Judea against Roman occupation. The empire, offended and threatened, sent its legions. After years of siege, in 70 CE, Roman general Titus encircled Jerusalem. The walls cracked, the food ran out, and the temple, centerpiece of Jewish life and worship, was set on fire. What remained was a ruin. What remained was the prophecy. For believers, this was proof of divine foresight. A seer who had glimpsed not just betrayal and crucifixion, but a cultural apocalypse. For skeptics, the accuracy is suspicious. The Gospels, after all, were written after the destruction occurred. Perhaps the prophecy was recorded after the fact, inserted as narrative symmetry. But that doesn't sit to erase what was lost, or what was said. The temple wasn't just a building, it was identity, it was ritual, it was the sacred meeting point between heaven and earth for the Jewish people. Its destruction splintered a world, reshaping not only Judaism but the very foundation on which Christianity stood. Even in secular scholarship, the temple's fall marks a historical breaking point, one that reshaped spiritual thought and empire policy alike. The prophecy, real or retrofitted, endures because it speaks to something deeper. Even stone can be temporary. Even permanence can vanish. This level of prophecy doesn't predict new technology or distant wars. And sometimes, someone knows it, long before it crumbles. It foretells loss of place, of the illusion that anything made by human hands can last forever. Not one stone left on another. And still, we build. Level 3. The dream that changed an empire. Location Rome. Era 312 CE. Prophecy type, visionary dream, Constantine the Great. Constantine, then still a pagan ruler, stood at the edge of civil war. If he won, he would become sole emperor of the West. If he lost, he would vanish from history, just another failed contender. But that night, as his army camped outside Rome, a vision came. In this sign, conquer. He issued the Edict of Milan, legalizing Christianity throughout the empire. He funded churches. He aligned himself with bishops. He called the Council of Nicaea. Constantine, the man of vision, became the emperor of conversion. What came next changed the world. Skeptics argue it was clever propaganda, that Constantine saw a chance to unify his empire under a growing faith, and invented the story later. But something about the timing, the swiftness, the scale of change, it all feels more than political. It won an era. Because whether real or retrofitted, that vision didn't just win a battle. Level 4. The white buffalo calf is born. Location: Great Plains, North America. Era: modern sightings, since 1994. Prophecy type: indigenous oral tradition, Lakota. The birth of a white buffalo is no accident. Not to the Lakota, not to any of the Plains tribes who still listen to the land. According to sacred tradition, the white buffalo calf woman brought the people their ceremonies, their pipe, and their way of life. Before she left, she made a promise. One day she would return, in the form of a white buffalo calf, to signal that great change was coming to the world. In 1994, in Janesville, Wisconsin, a calf was born, white, healthy, and rare beyond imagination. 1 in 10 million odds. The Lakota called her miracle. Thousands made pilgrimages. Elders wept, drums echoed in fields. Newspapers scratched their heads. Then, more calves followed in the years after. The prophecy said, this birth would mark a time of chaos or healing, depending on whether humanity remembered balance. And sure enough, the world tilted. Climate disasters, global unrest, cultural reckoning, but also ecological movements, re-indigenization, a return to the sacred in unexpected places. White buffalo aren't just signs, they're invitations. To the Western mind, prophecy tends to mean prediction, but for the Lakota, it's not about what will happen. It's about what is already happening, if you know how to see, to listen, to walk gently, to remember what we forgot. And they keep being born. Level 5, Nostradamus and the Broken Helmet. Location: France. Prophecy type: poetic quatrain, Century I, Quatrain 35. Era: 1550s. The young lion will overcome the older one. On the field of battle in single combat, he will pierce his eyes through a golden cage. 2 wounds made one, then he dies a cruel death. It was a poem, one among hundreds. But then it happened. In 1559, French King Henry II entered a jousting match to celebrate a royal wedding. His opponent, younger, less experienced, charged. Their lances met in midair, and Henry Sips shattered. A splinter of wood pierced through the slats of his gilded helmet, the golden cage, and drove into his right eye. The wound went deep into his brain. 10 days of agony followed. Then, death. Suddenly, Nostradamus's cryptic quatrain wasn't cryptic anymore. It was terrifyingly specific. The young lion, the golden cage, the pierced eye, the cruel death. Even the 2 wounds made one. His eye and skull injured as one. Did he truly foresee the death? Or are we simply good at stitching meaning backwards into random words? Whatever the truth, this quatrain became the symbol of his legacy, the one that made people listen. Because prophecy isn't set always about accuracy. It's set about resonance. And this one? It still chills the spine. Level 6. The fall of the Ottoman Caliphate foretold. Location: Istanbul, Ottoman Empire. Era: 19th century. In the final century of the Ottoman Empire, there were whispers among mystics. Prophecy type: Islamic mystical prediction, Sheikh al-Rafi'i, and astral calculations. Whispers that the throne was cursed, that the caliphate, which had survived for centuries, would not live to see the modern world. One name rises often in these murmurings: Sheikh Ahmed al-Rifai, a mystic scholar who delved into celestial charts and Quranic numerology. He made an eerie claim. Scholars later linked this to 1924, the year airplanes became common, and the very year the Ottoman Caliphate was officially abolished. The Caliphate shall not reach the year of the Iron Bird. It wasn't just a religious transition, it was the shattering of a global identity. After World War I, as the empire fragmented under Allied pressure, Mustafa Kemal Atatürk, the leader of the new Republic of Turkey, exiled the last caliph and secularized the nation. The centuries-old system of Islamic leadership ended with no war, no coronation, no last stand. Just silence. And for those who remembered the Sheikh's prophecy, it felt not like politics, but fate. Even more chilling, the prophecy wasn't popularized after the fall. Records show discussions of it decades earlier in Sufi circles. Whether coincidence or foresight, one thing was clear. The stars were watching, and they knew when the crescent would wane. Level 7. The Sibyl Seps Books and the Price of Ignoring Prophecy. Location: Ancient Rome. Era: 6th century BCE onward. Prophecy type: Mythic Scrolls, the Sibylline Books. The offer came 3 times, and each refusal burned history. According to Roman legend, an old woman, a Sibyl, appeared before King Tarquin the Proud, offering 9 sacred books of prophecy. They held the future of Rome, wars, disasters, divine instructions. But the price was high. Tarquin laughed. So the Sibyl burned 3 books in front of him. She offered again. He refused again. She burned 3 more. Finally, with only 3 remaining, he panicked and bought them for the full original price. Those final volumes were kept in the Temple of Jupiter and guarded for centuries. During plagues, famines, or invasions, priests consulted the scrolls. Their cryptic verses often demanded strange actions: burying statues, releasing specific animals, or fasting under eclipses. And whether by fate or coincidence, Rome survived. Until the books were lost. And Rome, it began to fracture. The story reads like myth, but its moral cuts deep. And sometimes what we throw into the fire is ourselves. Location: Lake Texcoco, Central Mexico. Era: 14th century. Prophecy type: Visionary mandate, Mexica founding legend. The Aztecs didn't settle where it was easy. They settled where prophecy told them to. According to oral tradition, the Mexica people were guided by their god Huitzilopochtli to wander until they saw this sign: an eagle perched on a cactus, devouring a serpent, rising from a lake. It sounded impossible, but after generations of migration and struggle, the sign appeared, right in the middle of Lake Texcoco. There, the Mexica founded Tenochtitlan, a city built on water, with canals, temples, and floating gardens. The prophecy had found its home, and from it rose one of the greatest civilizations of the Americas. But here sits where the story twists. That symbol, eagle, cactus, serpent, is still Mexico's national emblem, seen on its modern flag. Even after Spanish conquest, disease, and empire, the image persists. Why? Because some prophecies don't end. The Mexica prophecy wasn't about a moment. It was about belonging, a spiritual declaration that meaning doesn't come from comfort, but from alignment. The harder the land, the truer the sign. And centuries later, that eagle still waits in the desert sun, reminding the world. Sometimes the future rises from where the ground says no. Level 9. The Great Fire Seen in a Dream. Location: London, England. Era: 17th century. Prophecy type: Precognitive dream, John D. Nostradamus. In 1666, London burned. The Great Fire tore through the heart of the city. 4 days of flames that devoured St. Paul's Cathedral, thousands of homes, and the medieval core itself. Ash and smoke veiled the sky. And when it was over, people remembered the warnings. The blood of the just will be demanded of London. Some pointed back to the astrologer and mystic John D., advisor to Queen Elizabeth I, who had long warned of fiery purgation descending on the capital. Others turned to a line in Nostradamus' 1555 quatrains, interpreted to say, "London, take heed, thy time is set." But perhaps the most unsettling detail came from Lady Eleanor Davies, a 17th century noblewoman who claimed prophetic visions for decades. Her writings were scattered, frenzied, and often dismissed as mad. Yet one pamphlet, years before the fire, declared, "A furnace year shall leave thee wet. With tears and smoke thy churches raised." The fire began in a bakery on Pudding Lane, but the conditions, the dry summer, the wooden buildings, the wind, turned spark into inferno. Was it prophecy fulfilled, or just the inevitable meeting of match and kindling? Prophecies like this haunt history, because they feel like fate shouting through fog, clear only once we're inside the blaze. Level 10. The Monk Who Saw the End of the World. Location: St. Gall, Switzerland. Era: 17th century. Prophecy type: apocalyptic vision. The prophecy of Premol. In the archives of a remote Swiss monastery, a monk once scribbled a vision he claimed had come to him in prayer. The details were chilling. A time when the world would be engulfed in confusion, kings would fall, and iron birds would darken the skies. People would speak across oceans, and yet die of loneliness. Faith would become fashion, and nature would recoil. At first it sounded like medieval allegory, vague and poetic. But as the centuries marched on, readers began to revisit the so-called prophecy of Premol. Some saw world wars in his words. Others saw environmental collapse. Still others saw modern technology and alienation. The stars will fall closer to man. The prophecy resurfaced during the Cold War, shared among doomsday circles and fringe historians. Some claim it predicts satellites, climate change, or even nuclear war. Others dismiss it as monkish metaphor. But the deeper truth may not lie in accuracy, but resonance. The monk wasn't sept naming events. He was naming a feeling. That progress might be the ghost of something lost. And that one day the future would feel like a prophecy coming true, even if no one had believed it at the time. Level 11. The Prophecy of the Pope Sep's Final Hour. Location: Vatican City. Era: 12th century to present. Prophecy type: sequential vision. The Prophecy of the Popes. It begins with a list. A list that claims to name every pope from the 12th century to the final one, using only cryptic phrases. It was supposedly written by Saint Malachy, an Irish archbishop who in 1139 had a vision while visiting Rome. For example, each pope is described by a motto, often Latin, sometimes poetic, sometimes symbolic. De Mediatate Lunae for Pope John Paul I, who was born during a half-moon and reigned for only 33 days. De Gloria Olivae for Pope Benedict XVI, linked by some to the Olivetans, a branch of the Benedictine order. But it sips the last entry that brings the chill. Peter the Roman, who will feed his flock during great tribulation, and after whom the city of 7 hills shall be destroyed, and the dreadful judge will judge the people. The end. Currently, Pope Francis is not Peter the Roman, but he's the 266th Pope, and depending on how you count, the list ends either with him or just after. No one can say for sure. But every time a new pope is elected, the list is dusted off, the phrases are interpreted, the clock ticks. Because whether Saint Malachy saw the end, or simply gave us a lens to imagine it, the prophecy lingers. And maybe that sips its real power. Level 12. The Sleeping Prophet Sips Vision of New York. Location: United States. Era: early 20th century. Prophecy type: trance revelation. Edgar Cayce. One, in particular, has never stopped haunting people. In a series of sessions during the 1930s and 1940s, Cayce described the future of America, and it wasn't peaceful. He claimed that massive geological upheaval would come, that New York, Los Angeles, and San Francisco would be destroyed or submerged. He spoke of parts of Japan sinking beneath the sea. He spoke of the pole shift. And he gave a date range after 1998. Changes would begin. It was easy to scoff, until a few things started happening. Earthquakes in unexpected places. The 2004 Indian Ocean tsunami. Shifts in Earth's magnetic field confirmed by scientists. And then, most disturbingly, a Cayce-predicted island, long thought metaphorical, Atlantis rising near Bimini, seemed oddly plausible after the discovery of mysterious underwater structures in the 1960s called the Bimini Road. To his followers, these weren't coincidences. They were breadcrumbs, not to doom but to awakening. Because Cayce's prophecies weren't meant to instill fear, they were warnings wrapped in spiritual calls to action. His message was clear. The earth changes as the soul changes. If we descend into materialism and selfishness, nature reflects that corruption, but if we return to balance, we shift the timeline. He wasn't set predicting the end. He was asking us to choose a better one. Level 13, the Blood Moon Tetrad and the Shadow of Israel. Location, Middle East, global. Era, 20th, 21st century. Prophecy type, astronomical omen. Biblical and modern Christian interpretation, 4 blood moons. Each on a Jewish holy day. Each coinciding with seismic events in the history of Israel. This is the heart of the blood moon prophecy, a theory popularized by pastors like Mark Biltz and John Hagee, rooted in both biblical scripture and celestial alignments. The key verse comes from Joel 2:31. The sun shall be turned into darkness, and the moon into blood, before the great and terrible day of the Lord. Now, lunar eclipses aren't rare, but 4 total eclipses in a row, a tetrad, falling exactly on Passover and Sukkot. That's statistically stunning. Here sits what happened. 1949, 1950 blood moons. Immediately after the founding of the State of Israel and the Arab-Israeli War. 1967, 1968 blood moons. During the Six-Day War when Israel took Jerusalem. 2014, 2015 blood moons. Amid rising Middle East tensions, ISIS's peak, and growing global instability. Critics call it cherry-picking. The sky is always full of patterns. But even NASA acknowledges the rarity of tetrads aligning with these precise dates. To believers, these aren't just eclipses, they're cosmic highlighters, reminders that something prophetic is unfolding in the Middle East, something tied to ancient covenants. And so, every time the moon turns red, eyes turn east. Because maybe prophecy isn't just written in books. Maybe it's written in light, across the face of the sky. Level 14. The Girl Who Predicted World War I. Location, Germany. Era, 19th century. In a small Bavarian village, near the edge of the Black Forest, a young girl named Katharina began to speak in riddles. The year was 1806. At first, no one took her seriously. She was poor, illiterate, a child. But her words, strange, symbolic, were written down by monks and scholars. She described a world where horses had no legs but could run faster than the wind, often interpreted as automobiles. She said men would fly through the air like birds and drop fire upon cities. But the line that stopped people cold came decades later, when they read this one. The great kings of the north and east shall awaken in summer, and the meadows will bloom red with blood. Was Katharina merely echoing apocalyptic imagery from scripture, or had she truly seen the future through some veil no one else could pierce? Locals say she never sought fame. She didn't build a following. She just spoke what came. And when she died, people felt they hadn't lost a prophet. Level 15. The Oracle Bones of the Shang Dynasty. Location, Ancient China. Era, 13th, 11th century BCE. Prophecy type, divinatory ritual, pyro-osteomancy. Long before Confucius, before paper, before ink, prophecy in China was carved into bone. The Shang dynasty left behind a treasure of the ancient world, thousands of oracle bones, shoulder blades of oxen or turtle shells scorched with fire. Priests would ask questions, heat the bones until they cracked, and read the fractures as messages from the divine. These weren't vague omens. They were eerily specific. Will it rain on the 7th day? Will the King Sip's child be born healthy? Will there be war with the Yi people next moon? Then they recorded the results, not just the prediction, but whether it came true. These inscriptions, painstakingly carved and stored, make up the earliest form of Chinese writing. They are not myth. They are empirical prophecy, ancient attempts to test the divine. And the chilling part? Many of them were right. In 1899, a Beijing scholar noticed strange carvings being sold in medicine shops as dragon bones. Realizing their value, archaeologists traced them back to Anyang, the last capital of the Shang. Some even foretold the dynasty Sep's fall, omens of fire, rebellion, and a great shifting of the mandate. The oracle bones don't just predict. What they found was a prehistoric archive of prophecy, thousands of questions, answers, and outcomes etched into time. They show a civilization trying to negotiate with the future, like a gambler trying to tip the dice of fate. Level 16. The Dream of Constantine. And what remains isn't just writing, it's the fossilized shape of fear. Location: Roman Empire. Prophecy type: vision before battle, political and religious turning point. On the eve of one of the most decisive battles in Roman history, Emperor Constantine had a dream. He stood before the Milvian Bridge, preparing to face his rival Maxentius for control of the empire. The stakes were everything, not just power, but Rome's soul. That night, Constantine saw a strange vision. A cross of light in the sky, and beneath it, the words, "In this sign, you will conquer." The next morning he ordered his soldiers to paint Christian symbols, the Chi-Rho, representing Christ, on their shields. They won. Maxentius drowned in the Tiber. Some historians argue the vision was political, a tactic to unify troops. Others claim it was a genuine conversion moment. But Constantine's letters and coins afterwards suggest something deeper. He believed it, entirely. He gave land to churches, summoned councils, and banned pagan sacrifice. The Roman world bent toward the cross. One dream, one prophecy, one man, and the Western world pivoted on that night sky. Did the sign save an emperor, or forge an empire? Level 17. The Strange Accuracy of Mother Shipton. Location: England. Era: 15th, 16th century. Prophecy type: folk seer, rhyme and riddle. She was born in a cave during a thunderstorm, with twisted features and a crooked back. She became a figure of ridicule and legend. Ursula Southisle, better known as Mother Shipton, was England's most famous prophetess, a Tudor-era mystic whose rhyming predictions were whispered across villages for centuries. Her prophecies were full of symbols. Carriages without horses shall go, and accidents fill the world with woe. Around the world thoughts shall fly, in the twinkling of an eye. Many believe she foresaw trains, cars, and even the internet, though later versions of her prophecies were likely updated by Victorian printers. The world shall end in 21, when bridges fall and rivers run. Though often dismissed, some readers panicked during floods and bridge collapses in 2021, reading into the rhyme what they feared most. It didn't help that Mother Shipton had supposedly predicted the Great Fire of London, the Spanish Armada, and even the fall of Henry VIII's line. But believers say it's the rhythm of the truth that matters. That prophecy doesn't need to be precise, only resonant. Skeptics say it's retrofitting, that her verses are just vague enough to fit anything. Mother Shipton remains a paradox, part hoax, part holy, a reminder that sometimes the strangest truths wear the costume of old rhyme, and sometimes caves echo louder than cities. Level 18. The Mayan calendar and the end of the world. Prophecy type: astronomical timekeeping, misinterpreted apocalypse. Era: classical Maya. Location: Mesoamerica. It was the countdown that captured the world's imagination. December 21st, 2012. The date the Mayan long count calendar supposedly ended. Panic rippled across the globe. Apocalyptic documentaries aired. Bunkers were stocked. NASA received thousands of emails asking if the Earth would be destroyed. But here sits the truth. Their long count calendar was built around Bacchans, cycles of 144,000 days. The 13th Bacchans was set to conclude on that infamous day. To the ancient Maya, the number 13 held cosmic significance. It marked completion, not destruction. The Maya never said the world would end. In the 20th century, Western authors interpreted the calendar through a doomsday lens. The date was fused with apocalyptic Christian themes, New Age mysticism, and Hollywood drama. The Maya, long extinct as an empire, couldn't correct the story. But maybe that sits the real prophecy. Not that the world would end, but that humans would once again misunderstand the rhythms of nature, that we'd rather fear the cycle than listen to it. On December 22nd, the sun rose as usual. Level 19. The Prophecy of the White Buffalo. Era: pre-colonial to present. In Lakota tradition, White Buffalo Calf Woman is not just a prophet, she's a spiritual teacher, a divine being who brought the sacred pipe and taught the people how to live in harmony with Earth. I will return again, when the white buffalo is born. It became one of the most sacred prophecies in Native American culture. The arrival of a white buffalo calf would signal a time of great change, challenge, and spiritual awakening for humanity. Then, in 1994, it happened. A white buffalo named Miracle was born in Janesville, Wisconsin. Scientists were baffled. The odds of such a birth are estimated at 1 in 10 million. She wasn't albino. She shifted colors as she aged, a trait mentioned in the original Lakota stories. More white buffalo have been born since. Each time native elders hold ceremonies, interpreting them as warnings. The world is out of balance. Humanity is forgetting how to walk gently. But the white buffalo is not just a sign of doom. It is a second chance. A chance to remember something ancient. That prophecy doesn't always come as words. Sometimes it walks on 4 legs, through snow-covered fields. Level 20. The eruption of Vesuvius, foretold by Pliny the Elder. Location, Roman Empire, Pompeii. Era, 79 CE. Pliny the Elder wasn't a prophet. He was a Roman naval commander, scholar, and the author of Naturalis Historia, a vast encyclopedia of everything known to the ancient world. Prophecy type. Scientific intuition, natural philosophy. In his writings, Pliny warned about the deadly power of mountains that smoke. He had observed volcanic activity and theorized that underground fire and pressure could erupt violently, a rare view at the time. But sometimes, knowledge becomes its own kind of prophecy. In 79 CE, he watched as Mount Vesuvius darkened the sky above Pompeii and Herculaneum. Rather than flee, he sailed across the bay to investigate. He believed that knowledge was worth the risk. But as he approached, the ash thickened, toxic gas filled the air. He died trying to understand the apocalypse. His nephew, Pliny the Younger, later wrote letters describing the eruption. Those letters became the world's first scientific account of a volcanic disaster, so accurate that volcanologists still use the term Plinian eruption today. So was it prophecy? Not in the mystical sense. And sometimes observation is the purest prophecy of all. Level 21. The Prophetic Code of Saint Malachy. Location, Ireland, Vatican. Era 12th century, to present. Prophecy type. Sequential predictions. Papal list. In the 12th century, Irish Archbishop Saint Malachy reportedly had a vision in Rome, not of angels or beasts, but of future popes. He collapsed after the vision, and when he recovered, he recorded a list of 112 short Latin phrases, each describing a future pope, from his own era through to the last pope, before the apocalypse. For centuries, the list was hidden. It wasn't published until 1595, by a Benedictine monk. By then, dozens of the phrases had eerily matched real popes. From the midst of the moon, referring to a pope born during a lunar eclipse. Flower of flowers, linked to Pope Paul VI, whose coat of arms bore 3 fleurs de lis. Glory of the olive. Many tie this to Benedict XVI, from the order of Saint Benedict symbolized by the olive. But it's the final pope on the list that gives people chills. Peter the Roman, who will nourish the sheep in many tribulations, and the city of 7 hills will be destroyed. Some say the numbering is flawed. Others say Malachy's list was manipulated after the fact. But even skeptics admit, the accuracy of many phrases before the 20th century is unnerving. And in that case, the next prophecy might not come with words. Level 22. The book that predicted Hitler. Location, Germany, Czechia. Prophecy type, literary foreshadowing, the novel Blick in die Zukunft. In 1893, a Bohemian writer named Jakob Lorber penned a strange and sprawling prophetic novel titled Blick in die Zukunft, a look into the future. Buried in its pages was a detailed prediction of a charismatic German figure who would rise in the 20th century, intoxicate the masses with his speeches, lead Europe into war, and plunge the world into chaos. He even described gas chambers. Decades before Adolf Hitler came to power, the book spoke of a mustached orator from Austria, whose hunger for control would lead to a great burning and a storm of iron across Europe. The book received little attention at the time. It wasn't meant as fiction. Lorber claimed he was transcribing divine dictation, receiving messages from God himself. Skeptics dismissed it as religious delusion. It's unclear how much of the text was retroactively edited, but early copies still exist. Scholars have verified much of it remained unchanged since the 19th century. What's stranger is that Lorber made no claim to special vision. He was a failed violinist, not a theologian. And yet somehow, in a quiet room in 1893, he may have written the outline of one of the darkest chapters in human history before it began. Location, Bulgaria. Era, 20th century. Prophecy type, blind mystic, Eastern European seer. She lost her sight in a dust storm at age 12, and claimed she gained something else in return. Baba Vanga, the blind mystic of Bulgaria, became one of the most famous prophets of the 20th century. Her home became a pilgrimage site, visited by politicians, military leaders, and ordinary people desperate to hear what the future held. The 9/11 attacks. 2 steel birds will fall on the American brothers. The rise of ISIS. A great Muslim war will begin in Syria. Skeptics argue that her followers reshaped her words after the fact, but several of her predictions were documented before the events occurred, recorded by Bulgarian academics and state officials. And then there sits the chilling part. She predicted 2023 would be the year of a biological shift, where humanity starts controlling birth at the genetic level, gene editing, artificial wombs, designer children. She spoke of a time beyond war, where identity, not borders, would decide fate. Her final prophecy. People dismiss her as folklore. But others, listen carefully. In the year 5079, the world will end. But before then, many will try to leave it. Because she never asked to see the future. She just couldn't stop seeing it. Level 24, the prophecy, hidden in the I Ching. Location, ancient China. Era, circa 1000 BCE to present. You don't read it. The I Ching, the Book of Changes, is a swirling labyrinth of symbols, lines, and shifting patterns that dates back over 3,000 years. Part oracle, part philosophical system, part cosmic mirror, it has been used to divine the future by emperors, scholars, and seekers. It's not a book in the ordinary sense. You cast it, using coins or sticks, to generate a hexagram, a figure of 6 stacked lines, broken or unbroken. Each combination corresponds to a passage, a principle, a prediction, but the power isn't in what it says, it's in how it reflects the moment you're in. But what if it wasn't set, just reflecting time? What if it was mapping it? In the 1970s, ethnobotanist Terence McKenna proposed a radical theory called time wave zero, using the I Ching's 64 hexagrams and mathematical sequences to chart a wave of novelty and repetition through history. According to McKenna, the patterns of the I Ching could predict not just events, but the structure of time itself. He even plotted major world events along his time wave: the rise and fall of empires, technological shifts, cultural renaissances. The wave was supposed to collapse into infinite novelty on a key date, December 21, 2012. Yes, the same as the Mayan calendar. Coincidence? Maybe. But some believe the I Ching encodes a mathematical truth about change, that history is not linear, but cyclical and recursive, a spiral, not a line. And when you consult it, you're not just asking what will happen. You're syncing with a pattern that's already been written, and that's still being written by you. Location, United States. Era, 1865. Prophecy type, premonitory dream, presidential death. It saps a quiet night at the White House. Abraham Lincoln, weighed by war and weary from 4 years of bloodshed, falls into uneasy sleep, and then, he dreams. He's walking through the White House halls. Everything is hushed. Shadows hang like curtains. He passes soldiers. One is crying. He hears whispers. Who is dead in the White House? The president, someone replies. He was killed by an assassin. Lincoln jolts awake. The dream is too vivid, too exact, and he shares it with his wife, with his aides, with his bodyguard. A few nights later, on April 14th, 1865, Lincoln attends a play at Ford's Theatre. He's shot in the head by John Wilkes Booth and dies the next morning. The dream wasn't set metaphorical, it was literal. Even stranger, this wasn't Lincoln's first prophetic dream. Throughout his presidency, he claimed to have recurring dreams that preceded key Union victories, dreams of drifting on an endless sea, each wave signaling a turning point. Or did he know, on some unconscious level, that his story would end in sacrifice? Was Lincoln tapping into something deeper? He once wrote, "It seems strange how much there is in the Bible about dreams. I think we must respect them." History did. And then it buried the dream with the man who had it. Location, Scotland. Level 26. The mystery of the Brahman seer. Era, 17th century. Prophecy type, folk oracle, cursed vision. They say he saw too much. Kenneth Mackenzie, better known as the Brahman seer, was a humble Highlander who reportedly gained second sight by placing a stone with a hole in it to his eye, a gift passed down through generations. His prophecies were vivid, strange, and disturbingly accurate. He foretold the clearances when Scottish landlords would evict entire villages. He predicted the railway that would split the Highlands. He saw wars, machines, and cities rising where sheep once grazed. But one prophecy changed everything. His final curse: the house of Seaforth shall fall, and the last shall be deaf and dumb. Years later, the Seaforth line ended, with Francis Mackenzie, who was born deaf and mute. The estate crumbled, the clan dissolved. The seer's stone was lost, or hidden. Some say it was buried with him, others say it still exists, passed quietly through generations. In the mist and moors of the Highlands, his name remains half myth, half memory. And when the wind howls through the heather, they still whisper, "He saw what steps coming," even now. Level 27. The Oracle of Delphi and the Fall of Empires. Location: Greece. Era: 8th century BCE to 4th century CE. Prophecy type: ritual trance, political double meanings. She sat above a crack in the earth, where vapors hissed, and the gods were said to whisper. The Pythia, or Oracle of Delphi, wasn't a lone prophet. She was a sacred role passed down through generations. Women chosen to speak the words of Apollo while in a trance, their bodies trembling, their voices cryptic. Kings, generals, and empires climbed the mountainside to ask her a question. But she never gave straight answers. You will go. You will return. Not die in war. A great empire will fall. Beware the wooden horse. The trick wasn't set hearing the prophecy. It was interpreting it. Croesus, king of Lydia, famously asked if he should go to war with Persia. The oracle replied, "If you cross the river, a great empire will fall." He took that as a green light. He crossed the river. The empire that fell was his. But was the oracle manipulating events, or merely reflecting what leaders already feared? Some scholars argue the priests interpreted her ravings to guide politics, while others insist her trance was genuine, induced by ethylene gas rising from below the temple. Either way, she shaped centuries of history. Ambiguity. Mirror-like prophecy that reflects more of the questioner than the future. Perhaps the gods don't set to offer answers, just echoes of our decisions. Wrapped in smoke. Level 28. The Sibylline Books and the Hidden Future of Rome. Location: Roman Empire. Era: 6th century BCE to 5th century CE. Prophecy type: sacred texts. Disaster contingency. In the heart of early Rome, a mysterious woman appeared before King Tarquinius Superbus. She offered him 9 books of prophecy, strange writings said to reveal the fate of Rome. He laughed at the price. So she burned 3 of them. She returned, offered the remaining 6 at the same price. Again he refused. She burned 3 more. On the 3rd visit, she offered the last 3 books for the original price. Tarquinius, rattled, finally bought them. These were the Sibylline books, and they were locked away in the Temple of Jupiter, only consulted in times of great crisis, plagues, famines, omens in the sky. They served as a cryptic manual for navigating catastrophe. The books didn't instead offer explanations. They offered actions, sacrifices to make, temples to build, rituals to perform. Rome obeyed. But in 405 CE, the temple burned, and Rome survived. The Sibylline books were lost, forever. Some say they still exist in fragments, scattered across monasteries and museums. Others believe the prophecies were always vague, adjusted to fit the moment, and we were just trying to read it in time. Still, the idea haunted Roman minds, that somewhere, written in an unknown hand, the script of history had already been drafted. Level 29. The Prophecy of the Spider-Woman and the Internet. Location: Hopi Nation, North America. Era: ancient to modern. Prophecy type: symbolic vision, technological paradox. The Hopi people of the American Southwest tell stories passed down from long before electricity. One of their prophecies speaks of the Spider-Woman, a divine figure who spins threads to connect the world, threads of spirit, wisdom, and destiny. In the ancient myths, the Spider-Woman taught the Hopi how to weave, not just cloth, but the fabric of society. She warned that one day, a great web would cover the earth. It would seem invisible, but it would bind everyone together. Some elders later interpreted this prophecy as the arrival of the World Wide Web. The Internet, an invisible net of wires and waves stretching across the globe, catching thoughts, images, dreams and fears. A web where all things are seen, all knowledge shared, all people connected. But the prophecy also warned of imbalance. If the web becomes a trap, not a thread of wisdom, humanity will forget how to walk. Today we scroll instead of journey. We post instead of speak. We read instead of remember. Is this the prophecy? The Spider Woman was never a destroyer. She was a teacher. The web can be sacred or suffocating. It depends on whether we sip to weaving it with purpose, or simply getting caught. Level 30, Nostradamus and the Fire from the Sky. Location, France. Era 16th century. He was a plague doctor, an astrologer, and a recluse with a candle burning through the night. Prophecy type, poetic quatrains, cryptic verse. He never claimed to speak plainly. He spoke in riddles filtered through dreams, stargazing, and what he called divine inspiration. An evil deed foretold by the bearer of a petition. The great man will be struck down in the day by a thunderbolt. According to the prediction, another falls at night. Conflict at Reims, London, and a pestilence in Tuscany. Many believe this eerily describes the assassination of John F. Kennedy, followed by the turmoil of the 1960s and a strange echo in Robert Kennedy's assassination. Others link his quatrains to the rise of Napoleon, the World Wars, and even 9/11s. Earth-shaking fire from the center of the earth will cause tremors around the new city. Critics argue that these are vague poetic guesses, vague enough to fit anything, but believers counter, if they were so vague, why do they so often feel true? Maybe prophecy isn't set about precision. Maybe it sits about resonance. He was warning us about patterns. And Nostradamus, writing in candle-lit solitude as the plague swept Europe, wasn't warning us about specifics. And patterns always return. Level 31, The Sleeping Prophet, Edgar Cayce and Atlantis. Location, United States. Prophecy type, trance visions, channeled readings. Cayce gave over 14,000 readings during his lifetime, covering health, spiritual healing, reincarnation, and lost civilizations. He spoke in another voice, calm, confident, distant, and began predicting the future. Most famously, he predicted that the lost city of Atlantis would rise again, not metaphorically, but literally. A portion of the temples may yet be discovered under the slime of ages and seawater near Bimini, in 1968 or 1969. In 1968, divers near Bimini Island in the Bahamas discovered what they called the Bimini Road, massive underwater limestone blocks arranged in a pattern that some claimed looked like an ancient pier or path. Coincidence or confirmation? But others point to the sheer volume of his readings, many of which included highly specific medical advice that was later validated. Skeptics call it self-fulfilling nonsense. Edgar Cayce never asked to be a prophet. Level 32. The vision that warned of the Titanic. He simply slept and saw. Era 1912. Location, England, North Atlantic. Prophecy type, precognitive dream, disaster forewarning. The Titanic, the unsinkable marvel of human engineering. One of the most famous ships in history was born of pride. But long before it struck the iceberg, the warnings had begun. It told the story of a massive luxury liner called the Titan that hit an iceberg in the North Atlantic on an April night and sank due to a lack of lifeboats. The parallels were uncanny. The Titan was 800 feet long. The Titanic was 882. Both struck icebergs. Both lacked enough lifeboats. And that's ship's fiction. Both were described as the largest ships ever built. But then came the dreams. Multiple passengers who cancelled their tickets later reported unease or dreams of drowning. One survivor, Jessie Sayre, had a dream the night before sailing, a ship cracking in half, screams in the dark, water rushing in. Her parents begged her not to go. She survived, barely. After the disaster, psychics and spiritualists flooded the headlines claiming they had seen the tragedy coming. Others weren't set so lucky. Maybe most were fakes. But a few? Their letters, dreams and diary entries were time-stamped. Sometimes the future doesn't sit shout. It whispers. And if you're listening, it sounds a lot like déjà vu. Level 33. The Mayan calendar and the end that didn't set. Come. Location, Mesoamerica. Era 2000 BCE to 2012 CE. Prophecy type. Astronomical calendar. Misread ending. It was never supposed to be about the end of the world. But when the Mayan long count calendar reached its final backtune on December 21, 2012, people panicked. Books were written. Documentaries aired. Some built bunkers in the desert. The Maya, expert astronomers and architects of time, created a system that mapped cycles stretching thousands of years. The 13th backtune, a period of roughly 400 years, was simply the end of a cycle. Like turning a page, like winter becoming spring. The world didn't end. But the prophecy never actually said it would. But here steps the mystery. Mayan inscriptions, like those at Tortuguero, hinted that the end of this backtune would mark the return of a god, possibly Bolan Yokte, a deity linked to transformation, war, and renewal. Not physically. There was a global surge in interest around consciousness, climate, spiritual awakening. People began questioning the structure of modern life. Even NASA had to step in to calm fears that a rogue planet was on its way. The prophecy wasn't sit false. To the Maya, time wasn't sit linear. It was misread, shaped by Western apocalyptic obsession. It was circular, recursive, and cosmic. December 21st, 2012, wasn't set to full stop. It was a breath. Before the next story began. Level 34. The old lady who predicted World War III. Location, Bulgaria. Era, 20th century. Prophecy type, blind seer, verbal visions. They called her Baba Vanga, Grandmother Vanga. Born in 1911 in a remote Bulgarian village, she was blinded by a storm as a child and claimed, from that point on, to see beyond sight. And people listened. Politicians, generals, and scientists sought her guidance. She foretold. Her predictions were delivered quietly, sometimes cryptically, but many were shockingly accurate. The Chernobyl disaster, the 9/11 attacks, reportedly saying, 2 steel birds will fall from the sky, the American brethren will fall after being attacked by the iron birds. The 2004 tsunami in Asia, the rise of ISIS, but most chilling of all, she spoke of a time when World War III would erupt, not from a single nation, but from a chain of conflicts, following natural disasters and climate catastrophes. She also predicted breakthroughs, the cure for cancer, the end of oil, a consciousness revolution in the 21st century. Skeptics point to vague language and retroactive interpretation, but others note that Baba Vanga never sought fame or money. She lived modestly. She claimed her visions came to her like flashes, and she was just a messenger. When asked how she could know the future, she answered, "It is written in time, I just hear the ink drying." She died in 1996, but her prophecies, scattered in notebooks and memories, continue to stir wonder and fear. Level 35. The dream that warned Gandhi of his death. Location, India. Era, 1948. Prophecy type, spiritual premonition, inner warning. He had faced decades of struggle, resistance, imprisonment. He had led a nation without a weapon, armed only with silence, salt, and soul. But now, he felt it. A few days before his assassination, Gandhi confided in associates that he had seen his own death. Not metaphorically, vividly. He dreamed of a man bowing before him, then raising a pistol. He saw blood, felt peace, and understood that his time had arrived. Gandhi Sip's last words were, on January 30th, 1948, as he walked to a prayer meeting, Nathuram Godse approached, bowed, and shot him 3 times at close range. Hey Ram. His dream had come true, not just in symbol, but in sequence. But was it prophecy? Or the deep intuition of a man so spiritually attuned that he felt the arc of his own ending? Some believe saints, monks, and sages can sense the soul's last footsteps. And Gandhi, who lived by truth, may have simply followed his final one in full awareness. Location, Russia. Level 36. The monk who saw the Antichrist in 2025. Era 18th century. Prophecy type, eschatological visions, end times timeline. In a remote monastery tucked into the cold forests of Russia, an 18th century Orthodox monk named Avvakum penned a terrifying prophecy. He warned of a time centuries after his own, a year marked by the rise of deception, when the world would be ruled not by tyrants or warlords, but by an idea so powerful it would seem righteous. His writings described a man of charm, beloved by many, whose speech soothes like honey, yet whose shadow stretches beyond the earth. This figure, he wrote, would emerge between 2020-25, not as a devil in red, but as a leader, a healer, or even a visionary. And then, the line that would haunt religious scholars for decades. In the 25th year of the next great century, the world will cheer the one who carries the mark, but the wise will weep. Many have interpreted this as a reference to 2025, a date Avvakum could never have known by number, yet seemed to evoke through poetic calculation. Of course, it may be coincidence, a poetic flourish misread by centuries of fear. But today, in an age of charismatic figures, digital control, and ideological polarization, the prophecy feels eerily modern. Whether or not there is an Antichrist on the calendar, the line between truth and illusion grows thinner by the year. Level 37, the Dead Sea Scroll, that echoed now. Location, Qumran, Israel. Era tilde, 2 ND century BCE. Prophecy type, hidden writings, pattern recognition. In 1947, a Bedouin shepherd stumbled into a cave near the Dead Sea and uncovered the beginning of one of the greatest archaeological discoveries of the 20th century, the Dead Sea Scrolls. Among ancient copies of the Hebrew Bible were fragments of apocalyptic texts, hidden warnings written by a sect known as the Essenes. One scroll, later called the War Scroll, foretold a final conflict between the sons of light and the sons of darkness, a spiritual war that would manifest in real-world chaos, plagues, betrayal, and false peace. But buried deeper in the fragments was a strange prediction. The world shall be connected by flame and image. Many shall see all things, and still be blind. The kings of nations will speak in one tongue, yet understand nothing. To modern ears it sounds like the internet, social media, globalization, where image is king, communication is constant, and yet misunderstanding reigns. But its tone of connection without clarity, of vision without insight, speaks eerily to the now. The prophecy wasn't set dated. It wasn't set even meant for us. Whether by fate or coincidence, the scrolls warn that prophecy may not be about seeing tomorrow. Level 38. The Pope who dreamed of a black sun, but recognizing today more clearly than the present ever allows. Prophecy type, papal vision, celestial metaphor. Era, early 1900s. Location, Vatican City. Pope Pius X, elected in 1903, was a humble man, deeply devout, wary of modernism, and reportedly prone to spiritual visions. One evening, during silent prayer in the Vatican chapel, he reportedly collapsed after seeing what he called a black sun rising over Rome. "I have seen one of my successors fleeing over the bodies of his brethren. He will leave Rome, and after his death, great darkness will fall." In 1972, Pope Paul VI echoed it, saying, "The smoke of Satan has entered the church." The vision was never formally recorded in a papal bull, but the story persisted through Vatican insiders, passed down like a whispered secret. Then, in 2013, Pope Benedict XVI resigned, an almost unprecedented event. He left the papacy quietly, and Pope Francis took the throne amid scandals, political tension, and global crisis. To some, it seemed like the black sun had indeed risen. But what does a black sun mean? In ancient symbolism, it represents a false dawn, a light that illuminates nothing, a hope that leads inward to shadow. Was the Pope's vision a metaphor for spiritual collapse, or a literal warning of chaos to come? In either case, his words continue to echo beneath the dome of St. Peter Seps, waiting to be fulfilled. Level 39. The Hopi Prophecy of the Spider Web in the Sky. Location, southwestern United States. Era, ancient to present. Prophecy type, oral tradition, symbolic vision. The Hopi people, one of the oldest indigenous cultures in North America, have passed down prophecies not through books or scrolls, but through oral teachings, sacred stone tablets, and ceremonial stories. One of their most haunting prophecies speaks of a spider web in the sky. When the web covers the sky, and people move through it without touching the ground, great purification will come. To modern ears, this evokes an uncanny image: satellites, internet networks, airplanes, and global communication spanning the globe in invisible threads. Another line warns, "You will hear of the sea turning black, and many living things dying because of it." After the Deepwater Horizon oil spill in 2010, some pointed to this as fulfillment, but Hopi prophecy goes further, warning of a time when humans become disconnected from Earth, from spirit, and from each other, a time when the fourth world ends. The Hopi believe we are living in that fourth world now. It speaks of a choice. Those who return to balance with nature will survive, those who forget the earth will not. Their stone tablet, part of which is said to remain hidden, tells of the true white brother, a figure who will return when the earth is ready to be healed. Some say it's a metaphor. Others believe the signs are already here. And still, the spider web grows. Level 40. The Islamic prophecy of the sun rising in the west. Location: Arabia. Era: 7th century. In Islamic eschatology, the study of end times, there's a chilling prophecy found in the Hadith, the sayings attributed to the Prophet Muhammad. He is said to have warned, "The hour will not come until the sun rises from the west. When it rises and people see it, they will all believe, but that is when belief will no longer benefit them." This phrase has sparked centuries of interpretation. Some see it literally, a cosmic reversal of planetary motion. Others view it symbolically, a spiritual awakening in the West, or a sign that the world has inverted morally, ethically, or even metaphysically. In recent decades, many Muslims began to associate this prophecy with the rise of Islam in Western nations, the spread of knowledge and light originating from the West, or even strange magnetic anomalies that scientists have observed with Earth's shifting poles. Could the Earth actually reverse rotation? Unlikely. But in 2023, a study revealed signs that Earth's inner core may be rotating differently, sparking sensational headlines about a future east-west flip. The sun rising in the west may not mean fire in the sky, but a shift in perspective, a cosmic reminder that even the most fundamental truths can change. And when they do, many will see too late. Level 41. The Celtic prophecy of the oak and the Holly King. Location: British Isles. Prophecy type: seasonal allegory, eternal return. In ancient Celtic mythology, time was not linear, but cyclical, ruled by the eternal battle between two kings, the Oak King and the Holly King. The Oak King ruled from winter solstice to summer, bringing light and growth. The Holly King reigned from summer solstice to winter, ushering in darkness and decay. They were not enemies, but necessary opposites, each surrendering power so the other could rule, again and again. Druids taught that when humans lost respect for this balance, when they stopped listening to the seasons, to the land, to the soul's rhythm, chaos would come. The prophecy warns, when the oak fails to bloom, and the holly grows out of season, the land will weep, and the sky will not answer. In 2020, naturalists reported unusual shifts in tree cycles across Europe, oaks blooming late, holly flowering out of turn. Climate change? But also a disruption of pattern, a dislocation from the old rhythm. Yes, modern druids and pagan practitioners say this isn't myth. And if we do not, that the earth, like the kings, requires us to yield when the time comes, the wheel may break. Location: Tibet. Level 42. The Chinese prophecy of the Iron Bird. Era: 8th century CE. In the 8th century, an Indian Buddhist master named Padmasambhava, also known as Guru Rinpoche, traveled to Tibet to spread the Dharma, but he didn't just teach meditation and mantra, he left behind a chilling prophecy. When the iron bird flies and horses run on wheels, the Tibetan people will be scattered like ants across the world, and the Dharma will reach the land of the red man. He said, at the time, the words were strange, nonsensical even. There were no iron birds, no horses with wheels, no way to imagine the West. But centuries later, the prophecy echoed with haunting clarity. In the 1950s, China invaded Tibet. Airplanes, iron birds, soared over the Himalayas. Trucks and tanks, horses on wheels, rolled through sacred valleys. Monasteries were destroyed. Monks fled. And the Tibetan people were, indeed, scattered. To India, to Europe, to America. The land of the red man, interpreted by many as Native America, became a surprising sanctuary for Tibetan teachings. Today, Tibetan Buddhism thrives in the West. The very destruction foretold became the path for preservation, and the prophecy remains a warning. They transform, and sometimes, the teachings travel farther than the conquerors ever could. Level 43, the revelation of the beast with 10 horns. Era, 1st century CE. Location, Roman Empire. Prophecy type, apocalyptic scripture, allegorical vision. The Book of Revelation, written by John of Patmos, is one of the most cryptic and debated texts in history. Its visions of beasts, trumpets, plagues, and final judgment have inspired centuries of both dread and devotion. In chapter 13, John describes a beast rising from the sea, with 10 horns and 7 heads, speaking blasphemies and demanding worship. It was given power over every tribe, people, language, and nation, and all the inhabitants of the earth will worship the beast. To early Christians under Roman rule, the beast symbolized imperial power, the emperor cult, or even Nero himself. But modern interpreters have gone further. Some see the beast as a global system, technocratic, corporate, digital, with many horns of influence. Others see it in AI, in algorithmic governance, in the seductive comfort of convenience that asks us to trade freedom for safety. In World War II, many Christians saw Hitler as the beast. During the Cold War, it was communism or capitalism, depending on who you asked. The prophecy adapts, and that sips its power. It may not foretell a single person, but rather a pattern. When fear rules, when truth is twisted, when worship is coerced, the beast is not coming. It is already here. Level 44. The Japanese prophecy of the 3 days of darkness. Location, Japan. Era, early 20th century. Prophecy type, Shinto-Buddhist hybrid vision, cosmic warning. In the early 1900s, a lesser-known Japanese ascetic named Deguchi Onisaburo began to speak of visions, blending Shinto cosmology with Buddhist eschatology. He warned of a time when the earth would fall into 3 days of total darkness, no sun, no moon, no stars. The sky shall close like a scroll, the air will grow heavy, and the gods will turn their faces away. The Catholic prophecy of 3 days of darkness foretold by mystics like Marie-Julie Joheny. He called it the time of great purification, a reset, a cosmic night before a new world. What sets eerie is how similar this is to other cultural traditions. The Hopi Sips period of purification, even modern fears of EMP attacks or solar flares that could plunge the world into literal or metaphorical darkness. Deguchi said, those who prepared spiritually, who remained calm, prayed, and kept inner light, would survive. Others would not. He wrote, "It is not punishment. It is clarity. When there is no outer light, only the inner flame will guide you." Skeptics dismiss it as metaphor, but recent solar activity spikes, magnetic field anomalies, and even global anxiety about power grid collapse have given the prophecy new relevance. 3 days of darkness. Maybe not literal. But what if it's already begun? In the way we set lost light. Level 45. The Mayan prophecy that didn't set end the world, even with 1,000 screens around us. Location, Mesoamerica. Era, 9th century CE. Prophecy type, cosmic calendar, misunderstood cycle. The year was 2012. Billboards, blogs, and late-night shows buzzed with a singular claim. The Mayans predicted the end of the world. Of course, it didn't end. Planes still flew, phones still rang, but something deeper and stranger was misunderstood. The Mayan long count calendar didn't predict destruction. It marked the end of a Bacan, a 394-year period, and the transition to a new cosmic era. December 21st, 2012 was simply the end of the 13th Bacan. But the final glyphs on the Monument 6 inscription in Tortuguero, Mexico, do mention the return of Bolon Yokte, a mysterious deity linked to chaos, change, and rebirth. Scholars debate the meaning. Was it metaphorical, ceremonial, astrological? And yet, the world did change. In 2012, smartphones became dominant. Social media transformed global communication. Climate shifts accelerated. Some say the prophecy came true in a subtler way. Collective anxiety swelled, not from asteroids, but from within. Not an end, but a psychic turning. The world didn't explode. The illusion of permanence. The quiet between epochs. Not after the end, but inside the reset. And now we live in the 14th Bitax tune. Level 46. The Lost Book of Sibyl that named the beast Sept's number. Location, Ancient Greece and Rome. Era, 6th century BCE, 4th century CE. Prophecy type, oracle writings. Numerological enigma. The Sibylline books, a collection of prophetic utterances attributed to ancient prophetesses known as Sibyls, were once kept under lock and key in Rome's capital. Later, John of Patmos would write this number into Revelation, not as a cipher of Satan, but as a puzzle requiring gematria, the ancient practice of assigning numerical values to letters. But so does computer, in certain transliterations. So does www. It in something cooking in the back, some multiple modern names, if one stretches the math just enough. In Greek and Hebrew, Nero Caesar adds to 666, and the message isn't that one number damns you, but that numbers can deceive. That prophecy can be buried in code, not to protect us from evil. Some believe the lost Sibylline fragments are hidden in the Vatican's vaults, never fully released. But to teach us what we fear to know. Level 47. The Indian saint who dreamed of flying cities. Location, India. Era, 15th century. Prophecy type, mystical vision. Technological premonition. The day shall come when iron birds will fill the sky, and cities shall float above the clouds, and man will eat light, but his soul will starve. But centuries later, his words seem strangely literal. To his contemporaries, it was spiritual metaphor. A warning about ego, pride and disconnection from God. Airplanes and floating megastructures. Satellite cities. Digital consumption, where people feed on screens, energy, speed, and yet, emotional starvation remains. His prophecy lies in the paradox. Kabir wasn't describing machines, he was describing what machines can't touch. As man gains the sky, he may lose the ground. As he fills himself with information, he may empty his heart. He ends the poem not in warning, but in invitation. The path is not upward, nor outward. It is the silence between two breaths. Find it, and the cities will land. Level 48, the Nostradamus verse, that named a fire from the sky. Location, France. Era, 16th century. Prophecy type, quatrain, cryptic chronology. No collection of ancient prophecies feels complete without Nostradamus, the French apothecary and astrologer, whose cryptic quatrains have haunted the centuries. Others see precision. In Century 2, Quatrain 41, he writes, "The cloud will cause two suns to appear. When the great pontiff changes land, the big mastiff will howl all night. At first glance, it's nonsense, symbolic, surreal. Due to atmospheric ash, sun halos appeared. Circular optical illusions that made the sun seem doubled. The air glowed, the sky howled with thunder. But in 1991, following the eruption of Mount Pinatubo, something peculiar was reported. In other moments of chaos, nuclear detonations, space shuttle disasters, meteor sightings, this verse gets quoted again. In 2013, when a meteor exploded over Chelyabinsk, Russia, the fireball streaked across the sky, injuring over 1,000 people. For a brief moment, two light sources lit the cold morning. Was it the Great Star? Is 7 days a symbol, or countdown? And the Great Pontiff? Some linked it to the rare 2013 resignation of Pope Benedict XVI, who literally changed lands as Pope Francis took the Vatican seat. But perhaps what makes Nostradamus enduring isn't set what he foresaw, but how eerily his riddles reflect our fears. They sit like mirrors. The more they show. Level 49. The Aboriginal Dreamtime Prophecy of the Burning Rivers. Location, Australia. Era, ancient. Prophecy type, environmental warning, songline transmission. Long before colonial maps carved Australia into boundaries, the Aboriginal peoples of the land sang its shape into being through songlines, oral maps and sacred stories passed from one generation to the next. Among these was a prophecy held by the Yolngu people of Arnhem Land. It warned of a time when the rivers would burn. The land will crack like dry shell. The waters will rise in fire, not rain. To Western ears, poetic, mythic. The serpent that sleeps below will spit heat through the skin of earth. But in recent years, the metaphor has become disturbingly real. Gas reserves, once buried, ignited through cracked land. Rivers literally boiled in places. In 2019 and 2020, wildfires ravaged Australia. Water turned to steam. Animals perished in numbers that stunned the world. And many Aboriginal elders, often ignored by mainstream governments, said, "We warned you." Their prophecy wasn't sipped abstract. It was a memory of balance lost, of nature retaliating not in anger, but in inevitability. What Western science now frames as climate change, Dreamtime saw as the Earth's own dreaming gone disturbed. The only way forward isn't carbon credits or invention. Level 50. The Dead Sea Scroll, that spoke of the war to end time. It semps listening to the old songs. Location: Qumran, Israel. Era: 2nd century BCE. Prophecy type: Apocalyptic Scroll, Messianic War. In 1947, a Bedouin shepherd tossed a rock into a cave near the Dead Sea and changed history. Inside, clay jars held one of the greatest archaeological discoveries of the 20th century. The Dead Sea Scrolls, thousands of ancient Hebrew fragments, hidden by the Essenes, a mystical Jewish sect. The war of the sons of light against the sons of darkness. Among them was a scroll titled, "Unlike the spiritual metaphors of later scriptures, this one reads like a battle manual. Army formations, priest-led warriors, trumpet codes, apocalyptic timelines." The prophecy foretells a final war that spans 49 years, with the 50th year as the Jubilee when the earth is made whole again. The Essenes believed they were living at the end of an age, but others believe the scroll's language transcends era, that its structure eerily mirrors the rise of ideological wars, global surveillance, and spiritual disconnection today. Many scholars thought it was meant for the Roman occupation. Perhaps we sit not at the end of time. But perhaps, like the scroll, that history cycled, and time itself could fracture in war. We are simply buried in it. Level 51. The Aztec prophecy of the return of Quetzalcoatl. Location: Central Mexico. Era: 15th, 16th century. Prophecy type: cyclical return, divine deception. In the myths of the Aztecs, one name echoed with awe and dread. Quetzalcoatl, the feathered serpent, god of wind, learning, and resurrection. He was no warlord, no punisher. He was a bringer of light and a leaver of mysteries. One story told that Quetzalcoatl had once ruled among men, bringing wisdom and peace, until he was exiled over the sea. But before vanishing, he gave a promise. "One day, I will return." The prophecy grew with the empire. Priests calculated calendars, eyes watched the eastern horizon. And then, in 1519, a pale-faced man in armor stepped ashore. Hernan Cortés. To some Aztec priests, his timing was uncanny. He arrived in the exact year that marked the end of a cycle, the CE Acatl year, associated with Quetzalcoatl's return. He came from the east. He rode beasts the Aztecs had never seen. He wielded thunder and fire. And for a moment, prophecy blurred with conquest. Did they truly mistake him for a god? Or was it political theater, an empire grappling with uncertainty, wrapped in its own myths? Either way, the result was real. The Aztec Empire fell. To belief. To the strange power of a prophecy misread, or perhaps misused. But one truth lingers. The more sacred a cycle, the more dangerous its return. Level 52. The prophetic dream of the pharaoh sips 7 fat and lean cows. Location: Ancient Egypt. Era: approximately 1800 BCE, Middle Kingdom. Prophecy type: dream interpretation, agricultural foresight. In the book of Genesis, we read of Joseph, the dream-interpreting Hebrew slave who rose to power in Egypt. But the dream he interpreted was not his own. It came from the pharaoh. 7 fat cows emerged from the Nile, followed by 7 thin cows, who devoured the fat ones. Then, 7 plump ears of grain, swallowed by 7 withered ones. The pharaoh awoke disturbed. Joseph listened and said, 7 years of abundance will come, followed by 7 years of famine. Was it divine foresight, or a sharp reading of agricultural cycles? Either way, Pharaoh believed. Granaries were built. Food was stored. When the famine came, Egypt survived and gained power over neighboring regions who had not prepared. Historians suggest the story echoes real environmental events, perhaps linked to fluctuations in Nile flooding, El Niño cycles, or volcanic ash influencing rainfall. But the power of the prophecy wasn't set in magic. It was in the readiness to act on a warning. In an age of climate instability, rising seas, and global harvest disruption, maybe we don't need visions. Level 53. The Celtic prophecy of the last battle at Doon Scaith. Maybe we just need the courage to interpret what we already see. Location: Scotland and Ireland. Era: pre-Christian Celtic tradition. Prophecy type: mythic cycle, heroic apocalypse. There, the warrior maiden Scathach trained heroes in martial and spiritual combat, most notably Cuchulainn, Ireland's demigod champion. In the windswept legends of ancient Celts, few places carry as much mythical weight as Doon Scaith, the fortress of shadows, believed to lie on the Isle of Skye, Scotland. When the shadow returns to Doon Scaith, and the waters boil without fire, and the old oaths are broken by kings with no crowns, then the last battle will begin. It was said the earth itself would cry out. The boundaries between worlds, mortal and divine, would split, and only those who carried the true name of the land in their heart could survive. To modern ears, poetic nonsense. But the prophecy rings with eerie symbols: boiling seas, seen in recent underwater volcanic eruptions; kings with no crowns, some see in modern political chaos; shadows returning, metaphor for forgotten knowledge resurfacing in crisis. Some Celtic revivalists claim the prophecy refers to a final battle of spirit, not swords, a moment where humanity must reclaim its identity, not through dominance, but remembrance. Not a war to win. Level 54. The biblical vision of the four horsemen. Era: approximately 95 CE. Prophecy type: apocalyptic allegory, archetypal forecast. From the final book of the New Testament comes one of the most enduring and terrifying images in all of prophecy: the four horsemen of the apocalypse. A white horse, conquest, or sometimes interpreted as false peace; a red horse, war; a black horse, famine; a pale horse, death. This vision from the Book of Revelation, written by John of Patmos, was more than religious poetry. It was a coded message to a persecuted people living under Roman rule, and a cosmic warning echoed through centuries of human conflict. But what if the horsemen aren't literal beings? Think of the 20th century. 2 world wars. The Dust Bowl and Great Depression. The rise of fascism. The Spanish flu and nuclear shadows. Corporations expanding unchecked, mimicking imperial conquest. And in the 21st? Food insecurity rising in both developing and wealthy nations. Global pandemics returning with deadly regularity. Ongoing conflicts, proxy wars, and civil unrest. Prophecy doesn't always predict specifics. Sometimes it reflects the architecture of collapse. The four horsemen done ride once. They circle. And if you listen closely, you can still hear their hooves, just beneath the noise of modern life. Level 55. The Zulu prophecy of Shaka Sip's curse. Location: Southern Africa. Era: early 19th century. Prophecy type: royal curse, nation Sips, future bound to legacy. Before colonizers carved borders across southern Africa, the Zulu kingdom rose under a figure both feared and admired: Shaka Zulu, the warrior king. He reformed the military, changed tribal warfare, built a mighty nation. But after his mother Sip's death, grief consumed him. Shaka ordered a year of mourning where no crops were planted, no milk was drunk, no pregnancies allowed. Those who defied the edict were killed. And when the cattle bleed from their mouths, the land will know only rulers who forget the bones. And before his own assassination, Shaka was said to have uttered a curse. Years later, in 1856, a cattle-killing movement swept the Xhosa, influenced by a prophetic vision that destroying livestock would summon ancestors and drive out the British. Instead, famine followed. The sky itself will judge the kings. Rulers who forget the bones, those who ignore the dead, rewrite history, erase memory. Because in Zulu cosmology, prophecy doesn't expire. In modern times, Leaders across southern Africa still face unrest when ancestral traditions are ignored. Cattle bleeding, the loss of prosperity and voice of the land itself. Level 56. The Japanese prophecy of the five rings SIP return. It lives in the soil and speaks when memory is dismissed. Location Japan. Era 17th century. Prophecy type. Martial philosophy. Cyclical awakening. In 1645, the undefeated swordsman Miyamoto Musashi completed a brief but powerful book called the Book of Five Rings. It was not just a martial manual. It was a philosophy of combat, strategy, and life, written during his final days in a cave, meditating on impermanence and mastery. At the end of the book, he offers a curious insight. But when the world becomes without form, the five rings shall return. The five rings, earth, water, fire, wind, and void, represent physicality, adaptability, aggression, strategy, and spirit. In peace, they lie dormant. In crisis, they return. And now, in the digital era, a new form of formlessness has arrived, a world of abstraction, identity flux, AI, and unstable systems. In Japan's rapid modernization, Musashi's code faded, replaced by machinery, technology, and corporate culture. But in the 20th century, during post-war recovery, business leaders turned to Musashi's teachings to guide strategic thinking. His void strategy influenced not only martial arts but economics, branding, and design. In this chaos, the five rings return again. Not with swords, but with a question. What do you fight with? When the enemy is invisible. Prophecy doesn't always warn. Sometimes, it whispers a method back into our hands. Level 57. The Mayan prophecy of the long count sits, end. Era 3 RD to 9th century CE. Few prophecies sparked more modern anxiety than the so-called Mayan 2012 apocalypse. But here sips the truth. They predicted the end of a world cycle. The Maya didn't predict the end of the world. At the heart of it all was the long count calendar, a system that tracked time in massive units, baktuns, katuns. On December 21, 2012, the calendar would roll over from 13, 0.0.0.0 to 0 to 0.0.1, like an odometer flipping. It was renewal. New Age mystics fused it with planetary alignments, solar flares, and cosmic downloads. Westerners misread the calendar. Hollywood dramatized it. But in the jungles of Guatemala, elders said something different, and millions waited for fire. This is not the end. This is a door. What happened instead? In the decade that followed, humanity faced mass protests, pandemic, a digital reordering of life, a psychological shift toward questioning systems, time, and meaning. Maybe the Mayan prophecy wasn't set wrong. Maybe it was misunderstood. It steps a pivot, and some doors are invisible until you look back. Level 58. The Hopi prophecy of the spider web in the sky. Location: southwestern United States. Era: oral tradition. Pre-Columbian. Prophecy type: symbolic sequence. Cultural warning. The Hopi people, among the oldest continuous cultures in North America, hold a long sequence of prophecies carved into stone and passed by elders. Among them is a haunting image. A spider SIP's web will crisscross the sky. To outsiders, it sounded poetic. To Hopi, it was literal. Some say it refers to airplane trails, the growing lattice of satellites, or even the digital web, a global network of invisible signals that now wraps the earth. When the web touches all nations, and men walk on the moon, and the earth shakes in many places, then the final purification will begin. It predicted space travel, global communication, climate upheaval, and ultimately, a cleansing, not to punish, but to reset balance. They believe in correction. The Hopi don't believe in apocalypse. When humans forget their sacred relationship with the earth, when greed overrides gratitude, nature resets the equation. In 2001, as the internet truly went global, Hopi elders issued renewed warnings. They didn't fear technology. They feared forgetfulness. And now, as the sky fills with metal and clouds that never rain, one question remains. Did the spider web already form? Or is it still weaving? Level 59. The Oracle of Delphi and the Burning Empire. Era 8th century BCE to 4th century CE. Location: Delphi, Greece. Prophecy type: political enigma, dual meaning. High on the slopes of Mount Parnassus, the Oracle of Delphi inhaled vapors from a sacred spring and delivered riddles to kings and generals for nearly 1,000 years. One of the most chilling prophecies was given to Croesus, the wealthy king of Lydia. If you cross the river, a great empire will fall. Croesus took it as a green light. And he lost. The empire that fell was his own. This wasn't set a mistake. It was the oracle's genius. Speaking truths wrapped in ambiguity. They were about mirror logic, forcing the listener to confront their own assumptions. Prophecies, especially at Delphi, were never about clarity. Modern parallels are everywhere. Governments misreading intelligence. CEOs misjudging markets. Only now it comes in graphs and projections, algorithms and forecasts. People chasing certainty in data and missing the trap. Because we still crave prophecy. But the lesson remains the same. When you ask the future for permission, be prepared for its clever answer. Location: China. In Chinese mytho-history, Huangdi, the Yellow Emperor, was more than a ruler. He was a civilizer, the one who invented the calendar, music, medicine, even the compass. His reign marked the beginning of harmony, order, and Tianming, the mandate of heaven. And then, he vanished. Some say he rode a dragon into the heavens. Others say he descended beneath the sacred mountain to sleep, until China needed him again. Throughout dynastic history, rebels, philosophers, and emperors invoked the prophecy. The Yellow Emperor shall return. Through silt, flood, and drought, and whenever chaos reigned, during Mongol invasions, the Opium Wars, or the Cultural Revolution, whispers resurfaced. The Golden One will rise again. But it was never literal. The return wasn't a man, it was an ideal, a memory of just rule, lost order, ethical clarity. In the 20th century, scholars reinterpreted the prophecy as a longing for restored balance, not through monarchy, but through unity of people and purpose. Even today, Chinese media and literature subtly reference the Yellow One, especially in times of national anxiety. Some quietly remind that somewhere inside the storm, a sleeping harmony waits. Level 61. The Norse Prophecy of Ragnarok. Location: Scandinavia. Prophecy type: end-time myth. Cyclical collapse and renewal. It begins with a wolf swallowing the sun. The sky splits. The sea rises. Brothers fight. Gods fall. But here sips the secret. It starts not just destruction. It sets rebirth. According to the Poetic Edda, after the final battle, a new earth rises from the sea. Survivors repopulate the world. Balder, the slain god of peace, returns. This prophecy mirrored Viking life, violent, uncertain, yet hopeful. But some modern scholars argue it reflected climatic memory, possibly the volcanic winter of 536 CE, when ash darkened skies across Europe and crops failed. Others see it as a poetic description of societal reset, when systems crumble and myth gives direction to chaos. In the 20th century, writers revived Ragnarok to describe the world wars, the nuclear age, and now, climate change. The oceans swell. The skies burn. Technology devours its makers. Is Ragnarok a warning from the past? Or a code that reactivates every time we forget how fragile the world is? Level 62. The Sibylline Books, and the Fire That Was Sold. Location: Ancient Rome. Prophecy type: sacred documents. Bargained fate. The story begins with an old woman, perhaps a priestess of Apollo, arriving at the gates of Rome, offering 9 prophetic books to King Tarquin. Her price was high. He laughed. She burned 3. He refused again. She burned 3 more. Came back with the last 3, still at full price. Now spooked, Tarquin bought them. They were stored in the Temple of Jupiter, consulted in times of dire need, war, plague, famine. These were the Sibylline Books, and though lost to history, they shaped Roman policy for centuries. They were said to predict the fall of empires, the rise of foreign powers, and the coming of divine fire. How many warnings must be burned before people listen? But what sits most prophetic is the parable itself. It starts not about the books. It's about human arrogance, thinking we can delay fate, bargain with time, ignore wisdom until it's almost gone, and then pay anything to get it back. Climate reports. In modern context, vanishing species, ecological tipping points. And still, we hesitate. At the full price. Level 63. The Ethiopian Prophecy of the Ark Sept's Journey. Location, Axum, Ethiopia. Era, tilde 4th century CE and earlier from Judaic roots. Prophecy type. Hidden artifact. Sacred protection. In the highlands of Axum, a small chapel surrounded by walls and mystery holds what may be the most astonishing relic of all time. The Ark of the Covenant. According to Ethiopian tradition, the Ark was brought to Ethiopia by Menelik I, the son of King Solomon and the Queen of Sheba. So long as the Ark rests in Zion, no enemy shall rule the land completely. But when the watchers weaken, the earth will tremble. The Kebra Nagast, Ethiopia's 14th century national epic, weaves this prophecy into the very foundation of the Ethiopian monarchy. The Ark is said to offer not just protection but identity, a symbol of divine legitimacy and a spiritual shield. During the 20th century, Italy invaded Ethiopia under Mussolini. Despite being vastly outgunned, Ethiopian resistance held strong in many areas, and religious leaders claimed that the Ark's presence preserved the heart of the nation. Even today, a solitary guardian, a monk who may never leave the chapel, tends the Ark. Visitors are not allowed to see it. But pilgrims arrive, believing it radiates a force, a memory, a covenant. Skeptics dismiss the prophecy as myth. But others point to Ethiopia's unbroken Christian heritage, its resistance to colonization, and its spiritual endurance as the echo of something hidden but real. Perhaps the Ark Sept's power isn't just what it holds, but what it reminds. Level 64. The Dream of Pharaoh Sept's 7 Cows. Location, Ancient Egypt. Era, approximately 1800 BCE, biblical reference. Prophecy type, dream interpretation, famine foretold. In the book of Genesis, Pharaoh dreams of 7 fat cows devoured by 7 gaunt ones. He sits troubled. He calls Joseph, a Hebrew prisoner, with a gift for dreams. Joseph interprets the vision. 7 years of plenty will come, followed by 7 years of famine. Store now, or starve later. Pharaoh believes him. And Egypt prepares. But here sits the strange part. Archaeological evidence supports the idea that ancient Egypt experienced cyclical famines, likely driven by Nile flooding patterns and climatic changes. Records from the famine stele on Sahel Island describe 7 years of drought during the reign of Joseph, a king predating even Joseph's supposed era. Were the dreams myth built from memory, or prophecy from experience? Prophecies in ancient Egypt weren't Sept predictions. Even today, economic analysts reference the 7 fat cows in global markets, signaling times to invest, save, or brace for downturns. They were warnings with instructions. Dreams mattered because they guided action. And if more leaders listened to their dreams, or at least planned like Pharaoh, maybe we'd be better at surviving the lean years when they return. Location, American Southwest. Level 65, the Navajo Prophecy of the Fifth World. Era, oral tradition. Thousands of years old. Prophecy type, world cycle, threshold between ages. In Navajo cosmology, the world has been destroyed and remade 4 times. Each time, humanity lost its way. Each time, a new world had to be found. Now, we live in the 4th world, but barely. The 5th world is coming. According to elders, signs of this transition include disharmony with nature, animals behaving strangely, rivers that vanish. Sound familiar? The Hopi, closely related to the Navajo, share a similar sequence. Their prophecies say that unless humans remember their sacred role, the next world will arrive not gently, but by necessity. In 2020, as fires burned, birds fell from the sky, and silence spread across empty cities, some Navajo elders quietly said, "We are already in the doorway." But the 5th world isn't set guaranteed. These aren't set end-time stories. It sets a choice, a collective rebalancing. They set transition prophecies. And if humanity listens, honors the land, restores balance, then the next world might not come through destruction, but through return. Return to rhythm, to humility, to the original agreement with earth. Because prophecy isn't set just about what set's coming. It's about what we choose to carry across the threshold. Level 66. The Mongol Prophecy of Genghis Khan Sip's Return. Location: Central Asia, Mongolia. Prophecy type: Eternal Warrior, Slumbering Conqueror. If the world forgets the strength of the horse, I shall ride again. Before he died, Genghis Khan supposedly made a promise, not of peace, but of return. His body was buried in a secret location, guarded by a legend that no grass would grow on his grave until it was time for him to awaken. Mongolian shamans speak of a future age, one of global fragmentation, foreign corruption, and spiritual forgetting, when Khan will rise once more, not just as a warrior, but as a force of unification. In modern times, this prophecy has taken unusual turns. During the digital age, Mongolia has seen a resurgence of national identity, including horse culture, shamanism, and reverence for the Khan. In 1996, a rare lunar eclipse fell exactly on the Mongolian New Year. Pilgrims gathered at Burkhan Khaldun, the sacred mountain of Genghis's birth, believing the signs pointed to his symbolic return. Some believe the prophecy is metaphorical. Others say the hidden tomb, still unfound, will surface when the world most needs to remember the unity and ferocity of the steppe. When leaders crumble, when systems collapse, what rises may not be a man, but the memory of what no longer feared the wilderness. Level 67. The Prophecy of the Three Antichrists. Location: France, Nostradamus. Era: 16th century. Michel de Nostradame, better known as Nostradamus, is both history's most famous prophet and its most disputed. Among his hundreds of cryptic quatrains is a chilling thread. 3 great tyrants shall rise, each crueler than the last. The second, more clearly, is Hitler, or as Nostradamus cryptically wrote, Hister. The first he names only in riddle, but many interpret it as Napoleon, a man who conquered Europe, reshaped laws, and left ruin in his wake. The name was likely coincidental, yet eerily close. But the third? He shall come from the east. With a blue turban, and eyes of flame, he shall turn rivers to poison, and command a fire unseen. Many believe this third Antichrist hasn't arrived. Others argue he already has, or will soon, through digital power, nuclear control, or ideology disguised as liberation. Skeptics point to vague language and poetic ambiguity. But others see a pattern. 3 eras of transformation, 3 tyrants, 3 collapses disguised as crusades. It arrives with just enough logic to convince the crowd. Prophecy or not, history has shown that great evil rarely arrives screaming. And if the third Antichrist rises, he may wear a smile before a crown. Level 68. The Egyptian Prophecy of the Sphinx Awakening. Location: Giza, Egypt. Era: unknown. Ancient even in pharaoh times. Prophecy type: monumental timekeeper. Stone with memory. Carved from a single piece of limestone, it faces the rising sun with an eternal, unreadable gaze. The Great Sphinx of Giza is old, possibly older than history itself. But hidden beneath that gaze is a legend whispered by mystics and occultists. When the stars realign, and mankind forgets the riddle, the lion shall speak again. According to the Inventory Stela, a controversial artifact found near the Sphinx, even Pharaoh Khufu acknowledged the monument as ancient in his own time. In 1993, seismic studies beneath the Sphinx did detect unexplained cavities, rectangular, echoing with silence. Mystics like Edgar Cayce spoke of a hall of records hidden beneath the pores, holding secrets from Atlantis, lost technologies, and the blueprint of human consciousness. Permission to excavate further has been consistently denied. Why? Perhaps there sits nothing. Perhaps the real prophecy isn't set about chambers, but about what the Sphinx represents. A being part lion, part god, part man, waiting for a moment, when we're wise enough to understand the question it was built to ask. And if we can sit answer, maybe the silence is the warning. Location: Ireland, Rome. A list of 112 future popes, each described with cryptic Latin phrases said to culminate in the apocalypse. In the 12th century, Saint Malachy, an Irish archbishop, travelled to Rome and returned with a vision. Prophecy type: sequential succession. Final Pope foretold. In the final persecution of the Holy Roman Church, Peter the Roman will feed his flock amid many tribulations, after which the city of 7 hills shall be destroyed, and the dreadful judge will judge his people. Historians debate the authenticity of the list. It was first published in 1595, centuries after Malachi's death, but believers point to uncanny matches. The 111th Pope was Francis, who took the name of a humble saint but arrived during a wave of scandal, secularism, and global unrest. Gloria Olivae, Glory of the Olive for Benedict XVI, whose order, the Benedictines, linked itself to peace and the olive branch. That makes Francis the final pope, if the list is true. Vatican officials dismiss it as a forgery. But when Rome burns, when thunder falls upon the basilica, when cardinals argue over doctrine and division, the list resurfaces. And each time, the question becomes harder to ignore. What happens after the last pope? Level 70. The Cherokee Prophecy of the Rattlesnake Sept's Tale. Location: southeastern United States. Era: ancient oral tradition. Prophecy type: earth change. Timeline of collapse. Among the Cherokee, one of the most respected spiritual leaders of the 20th century was Rolling Thunder, who passed down this vision. The rattlesnake prophecy tells of a time when the snake representing North America will begin to move violently, not by choice, but by imbalance. When the rattlesnake shakes its tail in the west, and the mountains begin to breathe. The prophecy speaks of sky turning strange colors, rivers changing direction, fires running across dry stone. In recent decades, many Cherokee elders have linked this prophecy to climate disruption, fracking, wildfires, and the increasing instability of the continent. And in 2020, as wildfires scorched the West, one elder said, "The tale is shaking." In 2011, the Virginia earthquake, rare, sudden, and centered near ancient Cherokee lands, renewed interest. It steps about consequence. The land, they say, is not ours to own, only to remember. With a hiss, the snake reminds us. And when that memory fades, then a quake. Level 71. The Fatima Secrets and the Pope in White. Location: Fatima, Portugal. In 1917, 3 shepherd children in Fatima, Portugal, claimed the Virgin Mary appeared to them. Era: 1917. The first 2 predicted World War I's end, World War II's beginning, and Russia's rise. She gave them 3 secrets, prophecies to be revealed in stages. The third secret, however, was locked away, sealed in the Vatican, until the year 2000. When it was finally released, it described a bishop in white, walking through a ruined city, praying for corpses, until he is killed by soldiers on a hill. The Vatican interpreted it as a symbolic depiction of the 1981 assassination attempt on Pope John Paul II. But many believe that the true third secret has not been fully revealed. Cardinal Ratzinger once hinted that the unreleased portion involved a crisis of faith from within the church itself, not just war, but spiritual ruin. A crumbling Rome. A church bleeding from the inside. Secret knowledge withheld. Some say we are living the unspoken part of the prophecy now. Not with bullets, but with silence. Not with collapse, but with erosion of belief. Fatima was never just about children. It was about how truth is carried, and how long it can be hidden. Level 72. The Prophecy of St. John's Fire and the Black Cross. Era: circulated from the 14th century onward. Location: medieval Europe. In dusty manuscripts passed quietly from monastery to monastery, a strange prophecy began to appear across medieval Europe. And the red horse rides beneath it. Pestilence shall eat the breath of cities. This was known as the Fire of St. John's Cross, a dark celestial sign that would herald the fall of empires, and a plague with no cure. Though often dismissed as apocalyptic poetry, it became eerie folklore during the 14th century, when Europe was gripped by the Black Death. In 1347, as rats carried death from Crimea to Venice, villagers in France and Germany reported seeing fiery streaks in the sky, meteors, comets, or auroras, often followed by mass death within days. Chroniclers describe a burning cross overhead, and horses foaming at the mouth as wind turned black with flies. Later, in 1665, before the Great Plague of London, strange atmospheric events were again reported: red skies, heatless flames, wheels of fire. And each time it appeared, People remembered the verse. Modern scholars suggest these were optical illusions, dust clouds, or aurora phenomena from volcanic ash. But in the medieval mind, fire in the sky was never just weather, it was warning. When the black cross burns, death rides slow. Was it metaphor, mass hysteria, or a coded memory of cyclical disaster? We may never know. And silence settles before sickness. Some remember the prophecy. And look up. Level 73. The prediction of the fall of Constantinople. Era, 8th to 15th century. Prophecy type. Political collapse. Fated downfall. A great city between two seas, with golden gates and saints in stone. Constantinople, the jewel of the Eastern Roman Empire, lived under the shadow of a prophecy for centuries. Shall fall by the moon sips shadow, when the emperor sips line breaks. Inside the walls, priests sang. Civilians wept. The last emperor, Constantine XI, is said to have cast aside his crown and charged into the enemy line, sword in hand. This wasn't just one prophecy. It was many, spoken by monks, hidden in icons, whispered in courtyards and basilicas. They foretold that the imperial line would end, and the city would fall on a moonlit night, with fire, breach, and betrayal. On May 29, 1453, Constantinople fell to the Ottoman Turks. The moon had been full the night before. A lunar eclipse, visible across Europe, cast a shadow over the city days before the final siege. The line of emperors, unbroken for over 1,000 years, was gone. But others say it was timed. Today, some historians say the fall was inevitable, timed by a prophecy fulfilled not just by armies, but by the sky itself. Location, United States. Era, early 20th century. Prophecy type, geophysical catastrophe, Earth sex, axis realigned. Among his most controversial prophecies was this. Edgar Cayce, known as the Sleeping Prophet, delivered over 14,000 psychic readings while in trance states, many medically helpful, some deeply strange. The earth shall shift. The poles shall move. New lands shall rise, old lands shall fall. Cayce predicted a pole shift, a sudden change in the Earth's rotational axis, triggered by human imbalance and divine rhythm. He described coastlines vanishing, cities sinking and climates reversing. At the time, it sounded fantastical. But modern science has since confirmed that the magnetic poles are indeed wandering, especially in the Arctic. Some geophysicists note that a full reversal has happened before, though slowly. Others say rapid shifts could occur under extreme strain. And now, with glacial melt accelerating, Cayce Scepter's words echo louder. Then you still know the earth is rolling. He believed knowledge gives time to prepare. Cayce didn't claim to cause panic. If the earth is shifting, subtly, steadily, maybe even spiritually, it starts personal. Level 75. The Voynich Manuscript, and the Lost Calendar. Here are the next 3 immersive entries in your series, each between 300-500 words, continuing from level 75 to level 77, featuring historical riddles, cryptic texts, and predictions that seem to echo through time. Era, estimated early 15th century. In a climate-controlled vault at Yale's Beinecke Library lies one of the most baffling books ever written, the Voynich Manuscript. Prophecy type, encoded knowledge. Time out of sequence. Its parchment dates to the early 1400s. Its language, completely unknown. The script doesn't match any known alphabet, and its syntax defies all linguistic logic. The drawings, otherworldly. But what captures the attention of theorists and occult scholars alike is the final section, a sequence of circular diagrams said to be a lost calendar. Several diagrams align with known astronomical cycles, but others seem to track celestial conjunctions yet to occur. A few appear to predict solar eclipses and meteor showers, hundreds of years into the future, with eerie accuracy. Why would a 15th century document track something like that? Some argue the Voynich Manuscript is a forgotten alchemical record. Others believe it's a prophetic codex, documenting a cyclical collapse of civilizations based on planetary rhythms. But one strange thing is certain. No one can read it. No one can translate it. And yet, somehow, its diagrams keep matching future sky patterns. A prophecy, or a mirror, held up to a timeline we haven't fully entered yet. Level 76. The mysterious verse of the Zohar in the year 1948. Location: Safed, Ottoman Palestine, modern Israel. Era: text composed 13th century, printed widely from 16th century onward. Prophecy type: esoteric calendar prophecy, birth of a nation. In the 13th century, a strange book appeared, the Zohar, or Book of Radiance, a central mystical text in Jewish Kabbalah, allegedly composed by Rabbi Shimon bar Yochai in Roman-occupied Judea. It lay hidden for centuries before resurfacing in medieval Spain. The Zohar is written in Aramaic and coded parables, nearly unreadable without deep study, but one passage, long debated by scholars, seemed to mention a timeline for redemption. In the 600th year of the 6,000th year, the gates of wisdom above and the springs of wisdom below shall open, and the world will prepare to enter the 7th. In the Hebrew calendar, the 6,000th year spans 1240 to 2240 CE, and the 600th year? That corresponds to 1840 CE. But the real intrigue comes from the interpretation that what begins in 1840 culminates 108 years later, a Kabbalistic cycle of completion. That brings us to 1948, the year the State of Israel was declared. Many religious scholars saw this as a fulfilled prophecy. After 2,000 years of exile, a sovereign Jewish state rose in the exact year predicted by Zoharic scholars for the opening of redemption. Even stranger, the Zohar also speaks of a fiery return from the east, involving the awakening of Ishmael and a desert-born struggle. This has been retroactively interpreted to reflect the Arab-Israeli conflict, which began the very day Israel declared independence. Critics argue it's all vague numerology, coincidence wrapped in mysticism. But believers note, the passage was printed hundreds of years before the idea of a modern Jewish state existed. It remained dormant, until it wasn't. A book, hidden. A calendar whispered. A nation reborn on schedule. What is prophecy? If not history catching up to a buried sentence? Level 77. The Tomb of Tamerlane, and the Curse of Invasion. Location: Samarkand, Uzbekistan. Era: 14th century tomb. Prophecy fulfilled in 20th century. Prophecy type: tomb curse, trigger of World War. The great conqueror Tamerlane, also known as Timur, died in 1405. His tomb, the Guri Amir in Samarkand, became the stuff of legend, not for its beauty, but for the chilling inscription said to be etched into the crypt. Whoever disturbs my tomb shall unleash an invader more terrible than I. For centuries, no one dared open it. Until June 21st, 1941. A Soviet anthropological expedition, led by Mikhail Gerasimov, opened Tamerlane's tomb to study his remains, despite warnings from Uzbek elders. Within 24 hours, Hitler invaded the Soviet Union. The largest military operation in human history, Operation Barbarossa, was launched the day after the tomb was disturbed. Nazi forces swept through the USSR, killing millions, devastating cities, more ruthless than even Tamerlane's legendary massacres. In 1942, Stalin ordered Tamerlane's body to be reburied, with full Islamic rites. Weeks later, the tide turned. The Battle of Stalingrad began. Hitler's forces started retreating. Was it guilt? Or something older, a power no modern weapon could defy? Some say you can still hear whispering inside the tomb. Others say it stopped, only after the bones were put back. Level 78. The Prophecy of the Spider-Woman and the Web of the World. Location: Southwestern United States. Hopi and Navajo tribes. Era: oral tradition predating European colonization. Prophecy type: indigenous symbolic vision. Rise of the web. Among the Hopi and Navajo peoples, long before the arrival of Europeans, there lived an ancient mythic figure known as the Spider-Woman, a weaver of worlds, a creator, a guide, and also how to weave life together: thought, breath, time. She was said to have taught the first people how to weave cloth. In Hopi cosmology, time unfolds in cycles called worlds. We are now in the fourth world, and it is said that when the fifth world is near, there will be signs, one of which is the web around the earth. For decades, anthropologists assumed this was just metaphor. But in the 1990s, something changed. Elders from the Hopi Nation began pointing to the rise of the internet, satellite networks, and global digital grids as the fulfillment of this ancient vision. They described it not with fear, but with quiet awe. It is here. The web has been built. Now we must remember who spun it. They weren't referring to modem speeds or social media. They spoke of a spiritual web, a net of human minds, billions of voices tied together, whether they knew it or not. Spider-Woman told us a time would come, when the world would be connected by threads. The people would speak without speaking. But the danger is this. Or free you. To them, the internet wasn't set innovation. It was prophecy, arriving on glowing screens. Was it literal foresight? A poetic vision that came true by accident? Their prophecies were never about control, only rhythm. The Hopi didn't try to answer. And now, as we scroll endlessly, speak into clouds, dream through glass. And did she leave us this web? Before the world changed again? Level 79, the astrological chart that foreshadowed 9/11. Location, New York City Global. Era, Modern Astrology. 2001, roots in medieval Arabic and Hellenistic tradition. Prophecy type, symbolic convergence, skywriting of catastrophe. On the morning of September 11th, 2001, as planes struck the towers and the world changed forever, astrologers were staring at their charts in disbelief. At exactly 8:46 a.m., the moment American Airlines Flight 11 hit the North Tower, the sky above Manhattan revealed an astrological alignment that many would later describe as eerily preordained. Saturn, the planet of karma, discipline, and destruction, was opposite Pluto, the planet of hidden power, death, and transformation. In the astrological house of foreign affairs and enemies, the ninth house, Mars, planet of war, had just moved into Capricorn, its most powerful sign, a placement associated with military action, ambition, and structural collapse. This opposition only happens once every 35 years, and astrologers had long warned that the 2001 opposition would mark a tectonic shift in global structures. Many would later point to this as symbolic: the Twin Towers, falling as Mars roared, Saturn judged, and Pluto transformed. Even more startling, a 1994 edition of the Mountain Astrologer magazine featured a speculative article discussing a potential future war, financial collapse, or attack on New York when these planetary alignments returned. It wasn't set just modern mystics. Coincidence? Pattern recognition? Or was it, as some believe, the sky writing its warning? But it reflects the spirit of the age, and showed us what was already burning. Location, Israel and global. Level 80, the prediction buried in the Bible code. Era, Hebrew Bible, approximately 600 BCE. Code discovery in the 20th century. Prophecy type, hidden text grid, pattern in the letters. In the 1990s, a group of mathematicians, linguists, and theologians began to uncover something strange in the Hebrew Torah, a series of equidistant letter sequences, ELS, forming coherent words, names, and events when decoded on a grid. This became known as the Bible Code, a cryptographic structure allegedly embedded in the Hebrew Bible. Using computers to search letter skips across the 5 books of Moses, researchers found the names of historical figures, like Hitler, Kennedy, Edison, and even the phrase World War clustered near verses about conflict and destruction. But one prediction stood out. In a section around the Book of Numbers, the code seemed to produce the following matrix of intersecting terms: Twin Towers, airplane, terror. This was discovered and documented, notably by journalist Michael Drosnin, before 2001. Critics argue it's just confirmation bias. After all, if you search long enough, patterns will emerge in any large text. But proponents counter, only the Torah, when tested against thousands of other books, consistently revealed statistically significant clusters of relevant terms, far beyond chance. It was a message from beyond time, written not in sentences, but in structures, meant to be revealed only when humanity had the tools to see them. Whether divine encryption or statistical anomaly, the question remains. If our future is hidden in ancient code, who wrote it? And what else have we yet to decode? Level 81. The Dream of Polycarp and the Burning Bishop. Location, Smyrna, modern-day Izmir, Turkey. Era, 2nd century CE. Prophecy type, Martyr Sipt's dream, foreseen death by fire. In the early Christian world, Polycarp was a revered bishop, a student of the Apostle John, and one of the last surviving links to the original disciples. In his final days, Polycarp reportedly had a dream. He awoke and declared to those around him. This wasn't set poetic metaphor. Just days later, in 155 CE, Polycarp was arrested during a Roman persecution of Christians. And when the guards went to drive nails into him, as was custom to prevent escape from the pyre, Polycarp said, he refused to renounce his faith. The governor ordered his execution. Leave me as I am. He who gives me strength to endure the flames will give me strength to remain still within them. When they lit the fire, the flames reportedly arched around his body, refusing to touch him. Onlookers described the scene as a golden vault of fire encasing him. Eventually, a Roman soldier plunged a spear into him to end it. The blood, it's said, extinguished the flames. Whether miraculous or embellished, what remains is chilling. Polycarp dreamed his death, and met it without fear, a prophecy from within, and a quiet defiance against an empire. Level 82, Baba Vanga, and the Fall of the Iron Curtain. Location, Bulgaria. Prophecy type, Blind Seer, Eastern Bloc predictions. She was known as the Balkan Nostradamus, a blind Bulgarian mystic named Baba Vanga, who lost her sight during a childhood storm, and claimed to gain second sight in its place. Skeptics rolled their eyes, but by the 1980s, even Soviet officials were visiting her privately. In 1989, Vanga reportedly made a cryptic statement to a visiting group. The Iron Curtain will fall. Russia will weep. But from the ashes, she will rise again stronger. That same year, the Berlin Wall fell. Within 2 years, the Soviet Union collapsed. Vanga had supposedly been forbidden from making public predictions involving state matters, and yet, her words had been documented in notebooks held by local Orthodox priests. She also allegedly spoke of a black man in white who would lead the West in a time of division, a quote some would later connect to the election of Barack Obama, though interpretations vary. Today her home is a shrine, her notebooks studied, her accuracy hotly debated. But even if her prophecies were distorted over time, and the people who once laughed at her, she said the curtain would fall, and it did. Some still line up at her gate. Level 83, the Mayan long count and the turning of the age. Location, Mesoamerica, modern Mexico, Guatemala, Honduras. Era, 1st, 9th century CE. Prophecy type, cosmological calendar. End of a cycle. For centuries, the Maya long count calendar tracked time across thousands of years, encoding solar and planetary movements with staggering precision. The calendar SIP's endpoint? December 21st, 2012, the end of the 13th Baktun. Many misinterpreted this as a doomsday prophecy, earthquakes, fire, cosmic collapse. The 2012 panic spread globally. But Mayan elders insisted it was a reset, the close of one world, and the opening of another. It wasn't set an ending. And strangely, the shift was real, just not apocalyptic. AI began evolving rapidly. Old structures cracked. New patterns began to emerge. Global consciousness, from social media revolutions to ecological urgency, surged. But it changed, subtly, deeply. As one elder put it, the world did not end in 2012. It was about perception. The prophecy wasn't about fire. And the world that came after? We're still trying to understand it. Level 84, the visions of Hildegard von Bingen. Era, 12th century CE. Prophecy type, mystical writings, ecological collapse and technological transformation. In the vaulted silence of a Benedictine abbey, a nun named Hildegard von Bingen began to write visions. She described them not as dreams or imagination, but as the living light, overwhelming flashes of clarity from God that surged through her mind and left behind floods of knowledge. Her prophecies were strange, not just spiritual, but scientific, even ecological. One of her most famous visions described a world in the future, sickened by metal, where the air would burn and the oceans would boil with rot. She saw people fleeing the sun and beasts born not of God, but of man. Climate change, genetic engineering, toxic pollution, runaway industry. She also wrote of mirror boxes, through which people would speak without breath and hear the voice of the distant dead. Some scholars believe she foresaw television, video, even artificial intelligence. And yet, Hildegard never saw a city, never touched metal beyond a candle snuffer. How could she have imagined all this? When questioned, she insisted the visions were not hers. She was merely the vessel. I saw a great star fall into the sea, and all the world's beasts began to change. The children of man were no longer born of man alone. Her warnings weren't set fire and brimstone. They were songs of sorrow, about forgetting the sacred bond with the earth. Today, Hildegard is a saint, a composer, a doctor of the church. But her prophecies? Still unfolding. Level 85, the Kalachakra prophecy of Shambhala. Location, Tibet and India. Era, 10th century CE and onward. Prophecy type, cyclical prophecy, the future warrior king. In Tibetan Buddhism, the Kalachakra Tantra reveals a prophecy whispered through centuries. A time will come when the world falls into chaos. Morals decline, war spreads, technology outpaces wisdom, and the Dharma cosmic order weakens. But then, from the hidden kingdom of Shambhala, a warrior king named Rudra Kakran will rise. Not to destroy, but to restore. Shambhala is said to be a real place, hidden in the Himalayas, unseen by modern eyes, but real in another layer of perception, a realm of pure wisdom and harmony, veiled from those who live by ego. The prophecy says the final battle between materialism and compassion will begin when the 25th king of Shambhala takes the throne. But this is not a battle of guns. Their weapons will be the wheel of time. Their armor will be insight. Some interpret the prophecy metaphorically, that the battle is internal and the kingdom is within. The darkness will flee not by force, but by understanding. Others, especially in the East, believe it literally. That the rise of AI, ecological collapse, and spiritual confusion signal we are nearing the prophesied turning. Even the Dalai Lama, during Kalachakra initiations, has said, whether or not Shambhala is real is not important. What matters is that we act as if it is. Location, ancient Persia, modern-day Iran. Prophecy type, apocalyptic renewal, the Saoshyant, and the fire of truth. Long before the Abrahamic religions arose, a prophet named Zarathustra, or Zoroaster, walked the high plains of ancient Persia and whispered of a coming end. But not an end of fire and doom. In Zoroastrian cosmology, the world was created good, but wounded by a shadow force called Angra Mainyu, an end that purifies. Across millennia, this force would corrupt minds, poison waters, twist truth. But it would not win. Zarathustra foretold the coming of a Saoshyant, a savior born of a virgin lineage, who would arrive at the end of time to awaken the dead, defeat the lie, and begin the Frashokureti, the world's final renovation. For the righteous, it will widen into a lush path. The prophecy says that on the final day, all souls will cross a bridge, the Chinvat bridge. For the wicked, it will narrow to a razor and plunge them into suffering. But here sits the twist. Even the wicked will be redeemed. Because the final act of creation is purification, not punishment. A river of molten metal will pour across the world, and every living being will walk through it. For the pure, it will feel like warm milk. For the impure, it will burn, but only until the lie is gone. And then, no more death, no more deceit. A single, united world, made whole again. Some scholars connect this to later resurrection myths in Christianity and Islam. Others see it echoed in modern dreams of planetary healing, universal consciousness, and moral awakening after collapse. But what's striking is how early, and how precise, this vision was. A virgin-born redeemer. A final bridge. A fire that tests not just the wicked, but everyone. And even now, in scattered corners of Iran and India, the flame of Zarathustra's fire temples still burns, tended by priests who believe that the Saoshyant has not yet come, but will. No soul, however lost, will be forgotten. And when he does, Level 87, the prophecy of the Yugas and the Dark Age of Iron. Era, pre-Common Era. In the ancient Hindu scriptures, time is not a straight line. It steps a wheel, and the world turns through 4 great ages, or yugas, each descending deeper into darkness. Satya Yuga, the age of truth. Dvapara Yuga, the age of doubt. Treta Yuga, the age of ritual. Kali Yuga, the age of iron. According to prophecy, we are in the Kali Yuga now. This age is described in chilling detail in the Mahabharata and Puranas. Rulers will become unreasonable. People will prefer falsehood to truth. The virtuous will be mocked. Men will resemble beasts. The earth will be valued only for her gold. Technology will rise, but inner wisdom will decay. Greed will replace honor, and humanity will forget the sacredness of life. Many scholars once dismissed this as myth, symbolic poetry. But then, the uncanny specifics began to echo modern life. Political unrest, climate degradation, obsession with wealth, increasing isolation despite hyperconnection. The Vishnu Purana adds another strange detail. In the Kali Yuga, people will see across vast distances, speak without breath, and forget the names of the gods. To some, this sounds like smartphones, social media, digital alienation. The darker the Kali Yuga gets, the closer we get to its end and to the rebirth of Satya Yuga. The wheel turns, and prophecy says a new avatar of Vishnu will emerge. Kalki, riding a white horse, bearing a flaming sword of truth, not to rule, but to remind, to burn away illusion. Era, 6th century BCE, onward. Level 88, the Sibylline Books and the Fall of Empires. Location, Ancient Rome. Prophecy type, oracular writings, political and divine warnings. Legend says there once lived a Sibyl, a prophetess, who offered 9 books of prophecy to Rome's last king Tarquinius Superbus. He refused, so she burned 3. She offered again. He refused. She burned 3 more. Finally, fearing what he might lose next, he bought the last 3, at the full original price. These were the Sibylline books, kept in the temple of Jupiter, consulted only in times of great crisis, plague, famine, war. They weren't vague spiritual verses. They gave specific instructions such as, bury a pair of Greeks and a pair of Gauls alive beneath the forum. Appease the foreign god Cybele, and bring her statue from Phrygia. But when the temple burned in 83 BCE, the original books were lost. Later Roman emperors tried to reconstruct the books from scattered prophecies, collecting fragments from every corner of the empire. The words felt emptier, the guidance, vaguer, and not long after, the empire began to rot. The last trace of the Sibylline books was reportedly burned by order of the Christian emperor Honorius in the 5th century, a symbolic end to Rome's ancient voice of warning. Prophecies gone. And still, the question lingers. And what warnings died with them? Level 89. The Cherokee Prophecy of the Spider Sips Web. Location, southeastern North America. Era, oral tradition, pre-18th century. Prophecy type, indigenous vision, the coming web of glass. According to some Cherokee elders, a vision prophecy described a future time when a web will cover the earth, and people will speak through the web. For decades, it was told as metaphor, a warning about community and balance. A global digital web. A tool for connection, yes, but also control, surveillance and illusion. A trap for the spirit if used without wisdom. The prophecy also warns that in this time, the bees will begin to vanish, the seasons will forget their patterns, and people will lose their own names, choosing avatars instead. Modern Cherokee elders have interpreted this as a call to remember, to teach children the old songs, to walk the land with bare feet, to use technology as a tool, not a master. But if you forget she sips watching, because the spider sips web is not evil, you may never find your way back out. Level 90. The Enoch Prophecy and the Secrets of the Watchers. Location, Ancient Mesopotamia. Second Temple Judaism. Era, approximately 300 BCE. Prophecy type, apocalyptic vision, forbidden knowledge and judgment. In the Book of Enoch, a mysterious text once cherished by ancient Jewish mystics and early Christians, we hear the voice of a man who walked with God and vanished. These watchers taught humanity forbidden knowledge. The prophecy begins with the Watchers, a class of angels who descended to earth, lusted after human women, and fathered a race of giants called the Nephilim. Enoch, great-grandfather of Noah, was said to have been taken alive into the heavens, where he was shown visions of judgment, rebellion, and the secrets of the stars. Astrology, metallurgy, and weapon-making, sorcery, and how to manipulate nature. For centuries, the Book of Enoch was considered scripture by some, even quoted in the New Testament's Book of Jude, but it was later banned, hidden, and lost to the West for over 1,000 years. God, enraged by this corruption, sent Enoch as a messenger. His visions included the Great Flood, the destruction of the Watchers, and the final age of renewal where truth would rule. Celestial beings manipulating biology. When rediscovered in Ethiopia in the 18th century, scholars were stunned by its depth and its eerily modern themes. A warning against forbidden knowledge. A flood, not just of water, but of consequence. What if the Watchers never left? What if the judgment isn't set coming, but already unfolding? Location: Ancient India, Hindu and Buddhist sources. Era: Vedic period onward. Prophecy type: cosmic cycle, lost immortality, and its return. Amrita, the nectar of immortality. In Hindu mythology, the gods and demons once worked together to churn the ocean of milk, an act so massive, it split the heavens, to recover a single thing. As they churned using a giant serpent wrapped around a sacred mountain, many treasures emerged: poison, jewels, celestial elephants. Texts like the Puranas and Mahabharata hint that one day as humanity nears collapse, the divine nectar will resurface, not as a drink, but as a truth. Modern interpreters say this could mean a rediscovery of ancient medicine, a scientific breakthrough in longevity, or a shift in collective consciousness that dissolves the fear of death. Some even claim that psychedelic compounds or altered states, once used in secret rituals, are fragments of that lost Amrita. When you see billionaires chasing immortality, or shamans reviving ancient pharmacology, or brain scans mapping spiritual ecstasy, the myth begins to feel less mythic. Level 92. The monk who dreamed the fall of Constantinople. Location: Byzantine Empire. In the decades before 1453, whispers filled the monasteries of Constantinople. Era: 14th century. Prophecy type: monastic dream, the crescent over the city. A monk had spoken of a dream, a city covered in shadow, where the crosses fell, and a crescent moon rose above the domes. He saw fire in the streets, icons shattered, the gates torn from their hinges. At first it was dismissed. Constantinople had stood for 1,000 years, impregnable, divine, the jewel of Christendom. But the dream kept spreading. In his journal, the monk wrote, "I saw the Mother of God weep, and the angels close their eyes. The gate called Romanos stood naked, and I could not wake. When the Ottoman armies arrived under Mehmed II, they entered through the very gate the monk named the Gate of St. Romanos. And after the conquest, the Hagia Sophia, once the grandest church in the Christian world, was converted into a mosque. The crescent did rise above the city. Some say it was a coincidence. Others believe the monk's vision was true prophecy, a final divine warning to a decaying empire. But centuries later, the dream still echoes. Level 93. The prophecy of Shambhala and the final battle. Location: Tibet, Mongolia, and India. Prophecy type: hidden kingdom, future war of enlightenment. According to ancient Tibetan Buddhist texts, Shambhala is no utopia. It is a place of rulers, warriors, and cosmic timekeeping, guarded by the Kala Chakra, the wheel of time. The prophecy says this: when the world loses balance, when suffering spreads like wildfire through thought itself, then the gates of Shambhala will open. When greed consumes rulers and machines outpace wisdom, from this invisible land, the 25th king of Shambhala will rise, named Rudra Kakrin, and lead a spiritual army against the forces of darkness in a final battle that will not destroy the world, but transform it. The enemy? Not a nation, but a way of being, a consciousness infected with materialism, fear, and spiritual emptiness. This battle, they say, will be fought in the mind, not on soil, and its victory will not be domination, but awakening. Interestingly, the Kalachakra initiation, a real, elaborate Buddhist ritual passed down for centuries, trains monks to prepare for this inner war. Even the Dalai Lama has spoken openly about Shambhala's relevance, not as a place, but a future state of clarity and courage. In a world brimming with distraction, this ancient prophecy reminds us that the greatest revolutions begin not in cities, but in silence. Level 94. The Raven and the two-headed snake, Hopi Prophecy Rock. Location, Arizona, USA. Era, oral tradition, preserved in stone. Prophecy type, indigenous timeline, the two paths of humanity. This single petroglyph tells a story, not written in words, but etched in symbols. Two paths rise from a single point. The other path branches off, leads to disconnected figures, and ends in a broken line. Elders say this depicts the choice of humanity. One path follows nature, spirit, and balance. The other pursues technology, separation, and destruction. A two-headed serpent winds through the lower part, representing conflict and confusion. A raven appears near the center, a messenger between worlds. In the mid-20th century, Hopi elders warned that the time of decision was near. If we walk the lower path, there will be great purification. Fire, floods, and earth trembling. The gourd of ashes will fall from the sky. Many interpreted this as the atomic bomb. Others see it now in climate collapse, global war, and the spiritual numbness of the modern world. The rock does not move. But the prophecy also says this: if we return to the ways of harmony, those with wisdom will survive, and a new world will be reborn. The meaning does not fade. Level 95. The Yellow Emperor sips mirror and the prediction of virtual worlds. But the time to choose has already begun. Location: Ancient China. Era approximately 2700 BCE. Mythic historical period. Prophecy type: dream vision. Reality becoming illusion. In the tales of ancient China, Huangdi, the Yellow Emperor, is remembered not only as a founding ruler, but as a seer. According to esoteric Taoist scrolls and later retellings from the Han dynasty, Huangdi once entered a deep meditative trance after constructing a celestial device, a bronze mirror forged from metals gifted by the gods. In that mirror, he saw a future world unlike anything his people knew. A realm with people trapped in shining boxes, eyes that looked at dreams instead of the world. Realms built of thought, not stone. The prophecy said these mirror realms would feel more real than waking life, and that people would live more fully in the false than in the true. But the vision ended with a warning. When the dragon coils into code, and the self speaks in echoes, only it can hear, the way will vanish unless remembered. Modern interpreters believe Huangdi foresaw the rise of virtual reality, social media, or even simulated universes. Ancient scholars described the mirror world as a place where people forget their feet, a Taoist metaphor for losing one's groundedness. Remarkably, a real philosopher named Zhuangzi, 3rd century BCE, echoed this theme, writing, "How do I know that the dead do not wonder if they are alive?" The Yellow Emperor's mirror, once mythic, now reads like metaphor made literal. We live inside screens. Our memories are stored digitally, and our selves are split across countless reflections, avatars, profiles, digital ghosts. The prophecy was never about metal and glass. It was about the line between what is and what is believed, and what happens when that line fades. Somewhere, Huangdi Sip's mirror may still exist. But these days, you don't need a magic mirror to enter the illusion. You just need a login. Level 96. The Red Heifer and the Third Temple. Location: Israel. Era: Book of Numbers to present day. Prophecy type: ritual fulfillment. Precursor to apocalypse. For centuries, the red heifer was a symbol of longing and impossibility. No heifer was ever red enough. A single white hair would disqualify her, and so the prophecy slept, until it stirred. In 2018, the Temple Institute in Jerusalem, an organization dedicated to preparing for the Third Temple, announced that a perfectly red heifer had been born in Israel. By 2023, reports emerged of multiple red calves shipped from Texas to Israel under religious supervision. These were not internet rumors. They were documented, examined, and taken seriously by those who believe the time is near. The rabbis say that once a suitable red heifer is sacrificed, it will cleanse the impurity of death itself, paving the way for the reinstatement of the temple service, an act with apocalyptic significance in both Jewish and Christian traditions. In the Book of Revelation, this moment is echoed. The rebuilding of the temple becomes a final milestone before a global reckoning. But there is more than belief here. There is politics. The Temple Mount is also home to the Al-Aqsa Mosque, one of Islam's holiest sites. The rebuilding of the Jewish temple would set off world-altering conflict. And yet, the prophecy presses forward. To some, the red heifer is a strange farm animal with too much religious baggage. To others, it's a divine timer, the final grain of red dusted ash before something vast begins. Level 97. The Icelandic Cirrus and the Black Year of Fire. Location: Iceland. Era: 18th century. Prophecy type: poetic foresight, ecological collapse. In a windswept corner of Iceland lived a blind seeress named Groa of Storaborg, whose poems, known as Völuspá, warned of coming sorrow. She spoke in riddled verses, half lullaby, half curse. But one prediction stood out. When ash falls in summer, and grass dies in morning light, the hunger will walk before winter. Few took her seriously. Then came the year 1783. 20% of Iceland's population died. Animals starved as pastures vanished. Famine spread as far as India and Egypt, where monsoon patterns collapsed. The locals called it the mist hardships. Historians now look back and ask, did she know? Maybe it was coincidence. Maybe it was intuition. Or maybe she listened to the land long enough to hear its warnings. After all, prophecy isn't set always from the gods. Sometimes, it's just the earth whispering in its sleep. Level 98. The Blue Star Kachina and the End of the Fourth World. Location: Hopi Nation, Arizona. Prophecy type: celestial sign, end times signal. Among the Hopi people of the American Southwest, time is divided into worlds, great epochs of creation and destruction. We now live in the fourth world, they say. And it is ending. This is the Blue Star Kachina, the final sign before the day of purification, a collapse of the old world and the birth of the fifth. In 1987, Hopi elder White Feather of the Bear Clan told outsiders, when the Blue Star dances in the plaza, the ceremonies of the past will end, and the great cleansing will begin. In the decades since, theories have exploded. Some believe the supernova 1987A was the sign. Others point to the Blue Beam Project, or artificial satellites mimicking celestial events. But the prophecy is not only about the sky. It's about what happens when humanity loses its balance, when we forget the sacredness of water, earth and thought, when we laugh at the old ways and build new towers of data in their place. Then, the Blue Star Kachina dances. And the world does not end, it resets. Not in flame, but in forgetting. The Hopi say only those with clear hearts and calm minds will make it through. Not by running, but by remembering. Level 99. The Dream of Scipio and the Celestial Choice. Location: Roman Republic. Prophecy type: philosophical vision, the soul sips test before rebirth. Before Nostradamus, before Fatima, before Revelation, there was Scipio Africanus the Younger, and the dream that haunted him. In Cicero's De Re Publica, written in 54 BCE, the Roman statesman described a vision that Scipio shared with his peers, a vivid, layered dream, in which his grandfather, the great general Scipio Africanus, appeared to him from the stars. In the dream, the elder Scipio guided him to the edge of the heavens, showing him the earth from above, a fragile, floating sphere. "Behold," he said, "how small is the fame you seek, how narrow the glory of men." The younger Scipio was told that his life had meaning, but only if lived in virtue, that the soul was eternal, but only if it chose the difficult path, that the cosmos was alive with harmony, and to hear it was to live rightly. But what made this vision prophetic? It mirrored modern near-death experiences, astronaut testimonies, and mystical revelations centuries before they emerged. The view of Earth as a tiny blue world, that language appears in Cicero, 1,500 years before Galileo, 2,000 years before Apollo 11. The prophecy wasn't about war or famine. It was about the soul's temptation to forget why it came to Earth. In the dream of Scipio, the young Roman is given a choice: return to Earth with purpose, or remain in the stars and fade into divine anonymity. He returns. And in doing so, he becomes more than a statesman. He becomes a symbol. One who saw beyond the veil and still chose to act. In our time, his words echo louder than ever. A prophecy then, not of destruction, but of remembering the scale of the self against the stars. Level 100. The Last Prophecy. A voice without source. Location: unknown. Era: now. Prophecy type: Recursive echo, the listener sits role in the story. There is one prophecy that appears in no scroll, no scripture, no monument or museum. It has no culture, no author, no date. It accepts not told, but heard. Not written, but felt. It says, "You would not be here unless you were meant to hear this." The last prophecy is not about a coming war or a foretold king. It's not tied to place or tribe. It doesn't care if you believe it. It waits in the quiet. The kind of quiet that comes when you've listened to too many stories and started to wonder why they all feel like they were meant for you. It lives in the moments when a pattern emerges from coincidence, a sentence strikes like lightning, or a voice, without speaker, says something like, "This is the moment you remember why you came." Some say this is the mind looping. Others call it pattern recognition, pareidolia, delusion. But that sets the beauty of the last prophecy. It doesn't argue. It waits. Because the last prophecy is this. The moment you believe you were meant to hear something strange, you were. Not because it was planned, but because you set now the one who must carry it. But people make them true, by believing, by becoming, by listening again. And so it ends, not with thunder or fire, but with you, still listening, still wondering, still waiting for the voice that never speaks, but somehow says everything.